Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call upon Counsellor Watson to read the council prayer. Counsellor Watson.
My apologies, Madam Mayor. I'm looking for the words to the council prayer and I can't seem to find where they may have been sent. So,
would you like me to read it?
If you wouldn't mind, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. So, Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the city of Borondara. Amen. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Thompson to read the acknowledgement of country.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm just pulling mine up as well. Arithmetic. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and the original custodians of this land, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and elders from other communities who may be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. The Local Government Act 2020 enables Council to hold virtual meetings with councillors participating remotely by electronic communication. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website to enable public viewing of the proceedings, including councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website soon after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered, then the meeting will be adjourned until resolution. However, Council is not responsible for any technical difficulties that may be experienced by a member of the community in participating remotely in this meeting. Once the meeting commences, only limited assistance can be provided. I acknowledge the councillors present on screen for tonight's meeting, and there are also a number of officers in attendance tonight, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. So we'll now move to the order of business as listed on our business papers. Apologies, Ms. Manu. Are there any apologies?
Through you, Mayor, we have no apologies for this evening.
Thank you very much. Adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on 25 July 2022. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Park and Councillor Hollingsworth, did you have your, so you're happy to second? Yep. Can I check, is anyone opposed to that motion? There being no one opposed, I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you. The next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. So councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? I believe we have Councillor Watson Thompson and Councillor Bigger who are going to be applying for leaves of absence. And Councillor Watson, you are declaring one, I believe, for 7.11?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any others that need to be declared? Thank you. I can't see any hands up. So we'll note them when we get to it. So the next item is deputations and presentations, petitions, public submissions. Ms. Manu, are there any?
Through you, Mayor, we have one petition that's being presented to Council tonight, and the contents of that petition will be appearing on the screen in front of you.
Thank you very much. I'll give everyone a second. So is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the petition as printed in our business papers? Councillor Stavru, you're happy to move it? And I think Councillor Galt's hand was up next. Thank you. Happy to second. Can I check if anyone's opposed? Thank you very much. So as there's no one opposed, I can declare that motion carried. So public submissions, I'm assuming it's nil. Thank you. So the next item of business is informal meetings of councillors. And I'm checking whether anyone's prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings of councillors as was printed in our business papers. Councillor Gillies, you're happy to move that? Thank you. And Councillor Bigger, you had your hand up to second. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? Thank you. So there being no one opposed, I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, everyone. So our next item is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Questions submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions, or is it Ms. Manu?
Through you, Mayor, I'll respond on behalf of Mr. Wee. Tonight we have 5 questions with notice from 3 members of the community and no questions without notice.
Thank you very much. So I'll now turn to the questions. So the first question is from Matthew Roberts, and this one's been allowed. The question is, well, there are 2 questions. The first question is element 7 of a carried motion under item 5.2 of the 6th September 2021 Council Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting minutes requires Council to use its communication channels to inform the community about the decriminalisation of sex work. Why has Council not yet commenced this information campaign? And I'll also read out the second question because the 2 questions can be answered together. The second question is, when will Council commence the information campaign about sex work decriminalisation as required by a carried motion in 2021? And now, as I said, these questions are allowed because they have been previously put to a member of Council staff more than 10 days before this Council meeting. And I'm going to call upon Director of Urban Living, Scott Walker, to respond to these questions from Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to provide a response to the 2 questions, and they really do need to be taken together so that we can give the full context to the response. So firstly, on the 22nd of February 2022, the Sex Work Decriminalisation Act was passed by the Victorian Parliament, and there are 2 key components to the changes included in the decriminalisation of the sex industry, which commenced firstly the decriminalisation on May 2022, and associated changes to the planning scheme, which are proposed to commence in late 2023. And those changes are still yet to be finalised. So the whole package of changes to the sex work decriminalisation is still underway. Council made a submission to the Department of Justice and Community Safety in August 2021, raising our concerns with the proposed changes to the Sex Work Act 1994 and to regulating sex work under the Planning Environment Act 1987. Council supports key principles of the reforms, including protecting the safety of health of sex workers. However, Council has strong concerns with the removal of separation distances between sex work businesses and particular sensitive land uses. The potential to allow sex work to occur as a home-based business, for example, which is a key change to the planning system, may cause significant amenity impacts, and also the display of signage or advertising may adversely affect streetscape character. Officers have attended a number of information sessions, lodged submissions with the state government, liaised with other councils, met with relevant government ministers, responded to media inquiries, responded to public questions, and raised specific concerns about the way the reform will operate, including the proposed planning scheme changes.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. And Mr. Roberts, you will receive a written response to your question in due course. Now, our third question is from Margaret Whitehead, and it relates to Yarra Boulevard. And the question has been allowed. And the question is, have you considered the environmental impact of the recently installed freeway-style lights on Yarra Boulevard on the local grey-headed flying foxes, a threatened species who at dusk in summer commute from their roosting sites to forage areas along a route that includes now a very brightly lit intersection or intersections? And the question is allowed because it relates to a matter on the agenda, namely item 3 petitions for the current meeting. And again, I'm going to call upon Director Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Ms. Whitehead. Thank you, Mr. Freer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Yarra Boulevard is a tourist route which falls under the care and management of the Department of Transport, formerly known as Vic Roads. The Department of Transport is delivering a range of traffic treatments to address the long-standing serious safety issues along the Yarra Boulevard, involving speeding, hooning, and a high number of crashes. The DOT has advised Council that public lights over new speed humps and traffic management devices proposed are designed to Australian standards. Their advice is there is a requirement to maintain a minimum of 7.5 lux point horizontal illuminance around the design areas, and this includes a distance of 5 metres from the edge of the design of the refuge islands. As part of that assessment, DOT has advised they arrange for an ecological assessment to identify rare or threatened species within the area. The grey-headed flying fox was identified, however, it is determined that the impact would be low as the works would not be impacting the suitable habitat of feeding trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. And Ms. Whitehead, you will also receive a written response to your question in due course. So our fourth question is from Roderick Fawns of Kew, and again it relates to Yarra Boulevard and has been allowed. And the question is, how will Council act to restore the local environment of residents, both human citizens and wildlife, around the Kew Boulevard, mitigating against the extreme high-intensity lighting that has been installed at Molesworth Street, Yarra Street and Yarra Lee intersections? And again, the question is allowed because it relates to item 3 petitions. And again, I'm going to call upon Director of Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to Mr. Fawn's question. Thanks, Mr. Freer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and again through you, I will be repeating part of the response I've just provided. But Yarra Boulevard is a tourist road falling under the care and management of the Department of Transport. The Department of Transport is delivering a range of traffic treatments to address long-standing issues along the section of the Yarra Boulevard, including speeding, hooning, and a high number of crashes. The Department of Transport has advised public lights over new speed humps and traffic management devices are designed in accordance with the Australian standards, and their advice is there a requirement to maintain a minimum lux level around design areas, including a distance of 5 metres from the edge of the design of the refuge islands. DOT has advised during the design stage they sought to avoid light spill to neighbouring properties as much as possible. However, they have also given priority to meeting the standard to avoid any traffic hazards as well. They have also acknowledged that it is not possible to completely avoid any light spill into properties. DOT have undertaken an ecological assessment to identify rare or threatened species within the area. They have identified the little egret, powerful owl, grey-headed flying fox, freshwater catfish and the great egret. However, the impacts were determined to be low as the works would not be impacting the suitable habitat of feeding trees or works are not occurring within the suitable habitat for these animals. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And thanks, Mr. Frere. And Mr. Fawns, you will receive a written response, and I'll read out your second question, which again relates to Yarra Boulevard. How will Council ensure that future infrastructure on the boulevard will protect the natural beauty and amenity of the boulevard against very brightly lit, environmentally inappropriate roadside safety barriers, raised coloured platforms and pedestrian crossings, while seeking to protect speeding road traffic from their own propensities? And again, the question's allowed because it relates to item 3 petitions. And again, I'll ask Mr. Daniel Frere, Director Places and Spaces, to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. In line with the first response, the Department of Transport is responsible for Yarra Boulevard. Council has and continues to support an effective suite of traffic treatments to address the long-standing serious safety issues along the Yarra Boulevard, including speeding, hooning and crashes. The community has long called for action to address these issues, and the Department of Transport is responding through the delivery of a range of traffic treatments funded by the federal government. The Department of Transport is required to ensure all traffic treatments comply with relevant standards and guidelines. Council will continue, however, to raise the residents' issues with the Department of Transport. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And thanks, Mr. Frere. And again, Mr. Fawns, you will receive a written response. So that's the end of the questions. So our next item is notices of motion. Mr. Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have no notices of motion this evening.
And thank you very much. So next is the presentation of officer reports. I wanted to check if any councillor has any issues or concerns about the order or the possibility of on block motions. Now, there is a possibility that we could move several on block. I'll mention them and see what people think and whether they want to add any or minus any. So 7.4, which is the general tree service item. 7.5, street numbering. 7.6, telecommunication facility. 7.8, the audit report. And 7.10, the quarterly financial report. So if I could check whether people are happy with that or want to subtract or add, and then seeking a motion from someone. Councillor Park.
Chair, I'm happy to move on block motion incorporating all of those items in accordance with the officer recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stavrou. Thank you. And you're happy to second that group as on block?
I am, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. So can I check whether anyone's opposed to that motion? No? So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, you're against? No, thank you. Okay, so I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. So we're moving now to presentation of officer reports. The first item, 7.1, is weed management practices, and that's going to be introduced by David Shepherd, Manager, Environmental Sustainability and Open Spaces. Thanks, Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to confirm Council's weed management approach. We undertake weed management so that we keep our high quality presentation of our public spaces and we manage and protect our biodiversity. Our approach includes a variety of methods, but the part of most interest and contention is the use of herbicides. There are divided opinions on the safety and impacts of herbicides, and in particular glyphosate, which we do continue to use. It should be noted, though, that herbicide usage is our last choice. We seek to utilise other methods first where they're practical and affordable. The Council report tonight includes a study undertaken by Deakin University on alternatives to glyphosate. That report has been peer-reviewed and published, and it concluded that glyphosate is the most effective weed management approach of those that were considered. Our weed management approach differs across the different areas that we manage. There is some vehicle-mounted spraying for our streetscapes, spot spraying, a variety of different products to target specific weeds, along with our manual methods, and some steaming near playgrounds. This is detailed in attachment 1. All of these methods are undertaken in such a way that for a staff or community member to be exposed directly to a chemical would require a deliberate effort. Herbicides are sprayed with a hand wand positioned approximately 10 centimetres from the plant. Our work next to waterways is generally within our biodiversity areas, and any herbicides we use are approved by Melbourne Water. Our preference in these spaces is manual methods, but you can see in Appendix A that we do use a range of selective herbicides to target weeds that are difficult to remove, or where brush cutting would actually increase their spread by dispersing the seeds. If we don't manage weeds, there'll be a detrimental impact on the appearance of the city. It'll hinder our progress in increasing biodiversity areas and impact on the quality of our playing surfaces. In developing our weed management programs, it's also important for us that our staff and community are safe, they feel safe, and to minimise any risks. We can best achieve all of those outcomes through a combination of approaches to weed management that includes a small use of herbicides. Our intent is to continue to reduce the amount of herbicide we use without compromising the outcomes we're seeking. To do that, we plan to test some different approaches like increased dilution rates, the use of organic herbicides, potentially the introduction of goats to see how they go in Burundara. Operating in that way will give us the flexibility to use our knowledge and expertise and respond to any current developments in the industry while still delivering quality outcomes. The officer recommendation is on the screen and in your papers, and I commend that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Councillors, does anyone have a question for Mr. Shepherd? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. No questions, but I will foreshadow a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Now, Councillor Bigger, you had a question?
I do, thank you. So and thank you for this report, I really appreciate it, and the depth of it. The report mentions, I think it's on page 10 of 163, it says, and it actually says it more than once, I think, but that any products used near water are approved by Melbourne Water for this purpose. And now, obviously, I'm not, it's not to question Melbourne Water, but given that we are basically relying on them for that determination, you know, do we understand how they come to that? Like, is that based, for instance, on any kind of federal or state EPA standards, or is that a question you'd know the answer to?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Melbourne Water operate in accordance with the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, the guidelines received there, as do we. And they select their herbicides really carefully and with consideration that they are operating near water bodies. And so we take their guidance. It's not a formal agreement in any such way, but we do take their guidance in operating close to water bodies.
Okay, can I ask another? Thank you. I think you say on the next page, page 11, we mentioned that we use about, I think it was 980, is that right, liters of glyphosate per year. Do we have, I know we've done a little bit of, there was a bit of discussion about whether councils are doing generally, and some of the steps other councils have done, for instance, 6 of them have stopped using them in sensitive area, using this in sensitive areas the way we have. But do we have any sense about how our sort of rate per hectare would compare with other councils? Have we done any benchmarking like that to know how we stack up?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the benchmarking that we undertook gave us a good understanding of that, and we're at the lower end of the scale in terms of our glyphosate usage, because we've been quite successful in some of the other methodologies that we've introduced, such as increasing the mulching of areas, our mowing programs, the variety of different other approaches that we are taking is ensuring that we're at the lower end of that scale.
Okay, I just have one more, if that's all right. And this relates to, I think it's page 17 now, where we talk about the pros and cons of the different options. And I believe that you had, unless I misunderstood, I think we had one of the pros for ceasing use of glyphosate was that it would be cost saving for us. Is that correct? So that's an assumption that it costs us more to buy the pesticide than it would cost us in additional labor hours. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe that's an error in the report, because that should be a con. It will cost us more if we cease the use of glyphosate.
Okay, I didn't want to suggest it was an error, but I did want to just question that. Okay, so I see. You're saying that the actual cost implications are the other way around.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. We expect, without having done accurate costings, that the additional resourcing required and the use of alternate herbicides to replace glyphosate, if we were to do that across the whole of the municipality and all of our activities, would be in the order of $1 million. And the reason for that is both understanding what our current practices are and the experiences of Kingston Council, which has had a ban on glyphosate for 2 years leading up until last September, when they reintroduced the use of glyphosate.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. That's it.
I think that's probably all my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stavrou and Councillor Park. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you, just a follow-up question in terms of understanding the collateral costs as well. If we didn't use glyphosate, would there be any other sort of secondary costs, for example, through the weeds sort of proliferating and us needing to do more work and other aspects that high weed density may cause?
Mr. Free? Oh, no, sorry, it's Mr. Shepherd.
Sorry.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there would be additional costs and resourcing implications. As the Deacon report has highlighted, glyphosate is the most effective herbicide that is available. So other products will not perform as well, which means they either need to be applied on a more frequent basis and utilising resource in that way, or utilising resource in other ways, be that hand weeding or other manual methods of trying to eliminate weeds. There's also the potential that we wouldn't be able to achieve the same standards, which then leads to a reduced appearance of our public open spaces.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I didn't hear Mr. Shepherd's number in respect of the estimated additional cost. I thought it might have been $1 million, but then was that? It was.
Yeah, Mr. Shepherd, that's correct, isn't it?
That is correct.
$1 million per annum.
That is correct, for the whole municipality.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question for Mr. Shepherd. In areas, for example, Back Creek Reserve that's weeded by hand by an organisation called the Friends of South Surrey Park, does that eliminate the need for spraying along the creek beds in that area when you have a very active volunteer group working and manually removing the weeds?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it has the potential to do that, certainly, that if we have highly active and physical friends groups working in those spaces, it is possible. And Ashburton Forest Friends have achieved some great results in the Ashburton Forest through manual methods, but it does take high levels of commitment and frequency of work to achieve those outcomes.
And thank you. If I might just have a follow-up question. So in areas where there are friends groups that are actively having working bees, you know, in a structured way, I presume council biodiversity members liaise with those groups and then they determine, you know, what would need to be sprayed and what wouldn't need to be sprayed. Would that be correct?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, our biodiversity officers have very close relationships with those friends groups and do work with them on what activities they should be undertaking versus what activities we can do to complement the work that they're undertaking.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, you have a question?
Thank you, I do. I'd just like some clarification, if I could, from Mr. Shepherd. I'm a little bit confused now in relation to the question that was just raised by Councillor Hollingsworth and the manual weeding methods that are employed by admirable volunteer groups. But the report said, and Mr. Shepherd also emphasised earlier, that things like whippersnipping can actually spread the seed and make the problem worse. So would that be the case with volunteers who may not know that, you know, that how the seeds work on some of those types of weeds?
Through you, Madam Mayor. There's absolutely risks in having volunteers undertake weed management on our behalf, and that is one of the reasons that our biodiversity staff work very closely with these groups to try to ensure that they are doing things in the best way possible and not leading to detrimental outcomes because of their best efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to the officers. Just reading through the report indicates a dilution possibility of 50% of the glyphosate with a yield of maybe 90% effective, being effective. From a cost perspective, if we were to trial a location such as long as our water corridors with no glyphosate, do the officers have a view on that what that might cost over a 12-month period?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Our best estimates to eliminate glyphosate along the waterway areas, given that we've got the Yarra River, Gardeners Creek, Coonung Creek, and a number of other water bodies, is probably in the range of $150,000 to $200,000 to completely eliminate it, utilise potentially a different herbicide and manual methods to achieve the same outcome.
And just a follow-up question, would those areas, Mr. Shepherd, be the main sensitive areas from an ecological perspective, the waterways?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We certainly have biodiversity areas throughout the municipality, but the majority of them are along our waterways, so those main waterways that I mentioned.
And one further one, Madam Mayor, through to Mr. Shepherd, if we were to trial for a 12-month period removing glyphosate from those areas, would we have a better picture as to our own findings with regards to weed management, how we went with dealing with those weeds during that period of time? And when would be a good time to conclude that 12-month study? Would it be start of spring, end of spring, start of summer, etc.?
Through you, Madam Mayor. A trial like that would certainly enhance our understanding of the possibilities within our municipality. It would be a more intensive opportunity to explore those possibilities, whereas at the moment we are taking absolutely a proactive approach to trying to reduce our herbicide usage. but this would be, I guess, a fast tracking way to understand the possibilities in Boroondara. Timing wise, it wouldn't be great to start such a trial right now at the start of spring. So it would be better to commence it, say, at the start of summer, to finish it at the end of spring, next spring, for a couple of reasons: to give us the opportunity to make sure that we've got practices in place that have a chance to be successful, but also to not try to undertake this into the peak growing season, but still give us that opportunity to see a peak growing season once we've had an opportunity to implement some different practices.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank
Shepherd.
you. Councillor Park.
Just a question probably to the CEO. Given the magnitude of the additional cost that of something like $1 million that presumably is largely wages, what is the feasibility of the suggestion of volunteer groups and the like? I mean, it seems to me there'd be industrial relations issues and there'd also be risk management issues. I'd just be interested to hear your initial observations on those matters.
Mr. Story, you're happy to respond?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Park is correct in raising those issues. I guess, though, what I would say is that when you contemplate the scale of the maintenance task at Boroondara, we are a large municipality. There is a significant amount of open space which requires management in this regard. It is simply not feasible to expect you are going to get enough community groups, enough people interested to be able to do what it is that our staff do. So for those small number of sites where we might have that capability in place, that's terrific. It doesn't replace all of the management measures required, as has been said. It helps, but it is not a solution to rely upon community groups to undertake these tasks.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Park?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I can't see any other hands up, so Councillor Stavro.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just a minor question regarding any other alternative weed chemicals that may be used in an alternative study. Are they beyond reproach as well in terms of, or do we need to understand them as well?
Mr. Shepherd, are you happy to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The Deakin University study considered a number of elements of the products that they studied. The herbicides they looked at had similar schedules to glyphosate, which means they need to be handled in the same way. They are dangerous in some respects, so hence the need for personal protective equipment in usage and controlling of the space and ensuring that nobody's unnecessarily exposed to those chemicals. A number of them operate differently in the soil as well, so they translocate further than glyphosate and therefore can have further off-target effects. So there is a lot of detail in that Deakin University study that led them to the conclusion that glyphosate is the most effective and efficient herbicide available.
Thanks, Mr. Shepherd. Now, Councillor Thompson, you foreshadowed a motion.
I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the officers have got one that they can put up on the screen. Just acknowledging what Mr. Shepherd said with regards to what's the most effective time to do a trial starting in summer and concluding at the end of spring. We may need to just change a little bit of wording in that motion. So the motion here, item A and B, which refers to immediately ceasing the use of glyphosate for a trial period of 12 months, may need to say cease the use of glyphosate for a period of 12 months along waterways commencing the start of summer 2022 and concluding at the end of spring 2023, and the similar for item B. And then I'm just wondering if we're able to just get those changed.
Okay, let's pause for a moment and see, and then we can see if you're happy. And Councillor Franco, you had a question?
Madam Mayor, I just like to make a comment subject to the inclusion of comments of the additional changes that Councillor Thompson has made. I'd be happy to second the motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll bear that in mind, and once we see it. Thank you.
So the word immediately probably confuses it at the start of A, and immediately at the start of B. Probably we should say ceasing on both of those.
We're just getting that fixed.
Ceasing, commencing at the start of ceasing start. That's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And councillors, if I have a seconder to this, the residents, Madam Mayor, do you want me to just quickly mention what this motion is? Because our community hasn't seen this.
Yes, look, maybe do. That's probably a good idea. And then we'll check whether Councillor Franco's happy to see.
Thank you. So this picks up on the officer's report, noting that the officer's report looks at a dilution of glyphosate. This actually goes a step further to actually trial in two parts ceasing the use of glyphosate for a trial period of 12 months along waterways and corridors, Gardeners Creek and Yarra Creek surrounds. In addition, ceasing the use of star rain over the same trial period, because they both have an impact on our waterways. Part 2 is published on our website, the weed control site measures and practices, and the dates and locations for yearly weed management activities, which are occurring at our larger parks, etc. And the third point is to bring a report on the findings of the 12-month trial, which would include costs, so we have a more accurate picture on the future costs, and also anything else associated with that to a future services delegated committee. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Franco, now that you've seen it, you're happy to continue to second? Thank you. So for the benefit of Councillor Thompson and Franco, is anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. So there are people opposed. So Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Franco, for seconding. I'd like to firstly just start by acknowledging the officer's intent within their report to reduce the reliance on glyphosate. I'd also like to acknowledge all the residents who've taken the time to read the officer's report and to write to myself and to all councillors on this topic, which is a very important topic to consider. And trust that the officers will work through in the detailed responses that our residents have given us. I guess this is intending on reduction, if not phasing out, our reliance on chemical weed management, particularly chemical weed management with regards to community concerns about spraying, potentially in wet or windy conditions. And we know we've had a few incidents where that's actually occurred. There is growing community concerns with regards to glyphosate usage and its urban impact, particularly along our waterways and our watercourses. It's in our parks and where animals and children play. It also has an impact on biodiversity, including bees, butterflies, etc. There is obviously a debate on the human health impact of glyphosate. On one hand, the European Chemicals Agency in May 2022 has indicated that there is no change to the proposed hazard classification of glyphosate. On the other hand, the counter-argument is that Bayer, the owner of Monsanto, who creates Roundup, as the primary producer of glyphosate, settled approximately 95,000 lawsuits that the alleged Roundup caused cancer, to the tune of about $10.9 billion US. Studies on the human health impact are also limited, especially when it comes to assessing that within built-up areas, urban areas where the frequency of use of open space is higher. The potential to impact by wind drift is higher, and the users of our parks are quite high. The second part is obviously starane, which is a chemical that we do use along our waterways. It's highly effective in its selective herbicide and its management, but it's also highly toxic to marine wildlife, for example, crustaceans and fish, if the chemical contaminates streets, waterways, etc. And it's perceivably worse than glyphosate. So this motion actually seeks to do a couple of things. One, balance community expectations, which requires a full understanding of the benefits and the downsides of a permanent change to our weed management practices, e.g. a permanent removal of glyphosate as a weed management tool. It also requires an understanding of shifting sentiment within our community on the importance of the diversity of our environment beyond our parks and our ovals to our healthy biodiversity, a healthy habitat for bees, frogs, butterflies, and edible weeds. Balancing a community view that is, the jury is still out with regards to glyphosate and its health and human impact, but we also need to balance the view that weed management of our parks and gardens should also be high. There's the economics that we need to balance as well. So the trial actually will bring all three of those together, so we have a much clearer understanding of the impacts if we were to make a permanent decision. Much like FOGO, we can even look at composting our weeds, such as the South Gippsland Shire with the Fish Creek Community Composter that's in place. We can also look at animal grazing, particularly in our biodiversity zones, as Mr. Shepherd said, with the use of goats. This is being used to great effect by the Friends of Dandenong Creek in their areas. And this is only for a trial for 12 months so that we can have a complete understanding of the benefits and the downsides. The economic cost of this exercise, as Mr. Shepherd said, is around about $150,000, where we can study all of this area, which is biodiversity zone, which is about 12% of the overall biodiversity zone we have in the municipality. And also importantly, lastly, we can bring a report on these findings to a services delegated committee so that the community can actively engage with us, present to us, and we can hear from them and we can ask them questions. Unfortunately, in this format, we don't have that opportunity. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
And thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Franco, as the seconder, would you like to speak or reserve your right?
Reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Gillies. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the concerns raised by Councillor Thompson and by the community, and I've received a few emails and phone calls raising such concerns. But I'm actually really confident in the officer's report and the restrained use of glyphosate and other such chemicals for weed management across the city of Boroondara. And I trust that the CEO and officers have used their best judgment in bringing us to this point. It's certainly not the first time that we've discussed it. We've discussed it at length over many years that I've been present. And as I say, I'm confident that officers only use glyphosate where it's required and use it in a restrained way. We're in really difficult times, not just in Boroondara, but everywhere. And our economy is really important to me as well. So making sure that our officers are spending their time appropriately and not unnecessarily manually weeding areas that could be treated otherwise, is a real consideration. I know that from personal experience, if I let my weeding regime get out of control at home, that, things do get carried away. The weeds do grow unnecessarily. And if I was to change those habits for 12 months, then I dare say the 12 months thereafter would be much harder to try and recoup the lost time, having to use extra treatments and weed more manually. And I certainly can't begin to imagine that extrapolated across the entire municipality as to what officer time would be. So I've given this due consideration, and I'm happy with the officer's recommendation. I'm not comfortable with the proposal, albeit for 12 months, that Councillor Thompson has put forward, and I think that the outcome will be suboptimal for our community. I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Gillies, you wanted to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too would like to acknowledge the report. It's really assisted understanding the practicalities, the effectiveness, and the use of different weed control methods, and does a bit of myth busting too, such as the accusation that glyphosate was used around playgrounds. So I think that's important to clear the air about some misconceptions. There's a lot of peer-reviewed papers regarding the use of chemicals such as glyphosate that almost all say more research is required. So while there's no evidence that says stop altogether, and frankly that wouldn't really be wise without a plan B thought through anyway, I think some risk aversion is prudent here in order to delve deeper into alternatives. I do acknowledge the report, but I think there's room for deeper thinking and looking at alternatives. So this motion, for me, provides the cessation in the most publicly and ecologically sensitive areas, not municipality-wide, the waterways and the waterway corridors really, and it gives the officers direction to monitor and evaluate over a year, which means I don't think in 1 year we'll get to a point where there's irretrievable damage. But it gives us an opportunity to consider alternatives and the implications of those alternatives, including the costs, in more depth. So I am in favour of this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Watson, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't be supporting this motion tonight. I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. My concerns really fall into, we're really covered off by what Councillor Sinfield said. But in the experience that I've had over the last term and we're now nearly halfway through this council term, our community expects a very, very high standard for their public spaces. And a 12 months trial, I'd be open to a shorter period, but 12 months I think is excessively long, and we haven't picked a control area. We've just gone for the whole lot, being the waterways. And I get emails from residents who think we don't cut the grass often enough. I can't imagine what it's going to be like when I say, well, it's not your turn yet to have the goat. So I can't support this motion. I have grave concerns about officers hand weeding goats on our waterways, the cost, and I think that if we were going to suggest a trial, it would be a small area for a shorter period of time. And I'm very comfortable with the officer's recommendation and thank them for the work that they've done. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Park and Councillor Hollingsworth, and then Councillor Franklin.
It's a hard act to follow. Of course, councillors' role is strategic, but it's nothing new. Some councillors love to get down in the weeds, and here we are again, disregarding very clear expert officer advice because we think we know better. The squeaky wheel in Burundara manages to always get lots of attention, and this is yet another example of that. We've got a community that is more than happy with the current practices, and yet we're going to throw away $150,000 you know, that's money we'll never get back, hard-earned rates. We all got our rates notices only in the last couple of weeks. So 150 grand out the window, and we don't really care. So it would seem that's the clear effect of voting to support this motion. There's no need for it. I'm not sure at what point in time council became a research facility, but there's no way that I'll support this. I'd be happy to dig deep and get a few extra gates, although some would say we've got more than enough already. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Mayor. Look, whilst I appreciate Councillor Thompson's alternate motion, I'm still unresolved with where I'm going to sit with this one, but I do have strong reservations with the cost and the fact that we are talking Burundara-wide waterway corridors. As it's been said, perhaps if there was a sample site utilised, for example, with the alternate motion, A and B could both work towards a specific trial site and work towards the same trial site, I'd have a greater level of comfort with that to see and gauge the success in one specific area. As I mentioned before, there are some amazing volunteer organisations, for example, Friends at South Surrey Park, that are very well structured, well qualified and have an excellent relationship with Council's biodiversity team. And they do an incredible job at manually hand weeding and eradicating what we don't want along our waterways. I think that's a lot more effective. I know council officers, council staff are struggling for time and resources, and I don't know how they would manage all of Burundara wide if we accept this proposal. So if Councillor Thompson would consider amending his option to A and B both working to a trial site, I'd be more likely to support it, but I cannot support A at this stage, Burundara wide along all of the waterway corridors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Are you happy to wait and see what happens with this motion rather than trying an amendment now?
Yeah, look, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's something that I was foreshadowing Councillor Thompson may wish to consider. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, I feel it's a bit late in the piece because we're debating it.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to see the extent of the debate, Madam Mayor, and see where it lands.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stavro.
Madam Mayor. I certainly understand Councillor Thompson's sentiment and deeply felt emotion about the risks involved, but we've got a report that has got a deep scientific backing, and in the end of the day, the science goes back a number of years. And it is difficult to make decisions and pick and choose when we decide to take the science on board and when not to take the science on board. As we read the report, and as Councillor Gillies said earlier, it has debunked a number of myths that have been going around for a number of years about certain substances. And when you put that together with the potential costs and also what could happen in that year in terms of weeds, as we know, they do grow like weeds. And the more important issue is that we're probably not going to know any more about the safety of the product, about the economics. We probably don't know the extent anyway, because it might have effects post that year, because we might get a lot more seeding, a lot more density of weeds the years to follow. So it's giving us a clear picture. We shouldn't be sort of picking and choosing when to follow it, in my opinion. The clear picture gives us at least the clearance to say that it's not as dangerous as thought. The officers have recommended a diluted version of it. So on that basis, I think the prudent way to go is not to support the trial, because it's probably not going to give us any further knowledge at the end of that year.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Now I can't see any other hands, so I'll go to Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I agree wholeheartedly with the comments expressed by Councillor Gillies and by Councillor Thompson in this debate. Firstly, I won't repeat everything they've said, but I'll just touch on some key points. Firstly, in relation to the report and the work done by officers, I'm very pleased that we've got the report before us, and I'm delighted that it's come before us. I think it's really important to provide the transparency that the report does provide. We've got a publicly available report. It starts to create an open discussion about what we're doing and how we're going about it. And I think that's very important, rather than simply continuing on business as usual without the benefits of the report. I'm also pleased that the report does move in the direction of reducing glyphosate, and while I support the motion that Councillor Thompson has put up, I'm pleased that at least that's the tone and the direction of the report. The jury is out in relation to the medical issues, etc., but Councillor Gillies made it very clear it's about targeted and selective risk aversion or risk management, and I think the motion goes to the heart of that. And Councillor Hollingsworth suggested a further targeted version if this potentially may have flagged. And look, I'm just going to raise this here. And Councillor Watson mentioned, well, having a control area and not a control area. Look, I think the motion as proposed is sound, it's reasonable, it's about taking care in our most sensitive ecological corridors. But if it came to that, and if we really needed that, and if this motion does fail, maybe Councillor Thompson or others might consider, we could consider it just for the southern part of the municipality. Some councils have a left-right divide. We have a north-south divide, perhaps. So perhaps for the progressive south, we could do it in the Gardeners Creek corridor. So, and look, I just flag that. That's not my preference, but if it comes to that, perhaps that's something we can consider and approach that, and at least that would certainly go some way to addressing that. In relation to the issue that Councillor Stavrou raised about cost, I think it's modest. I think the costs are modest considering the issue that we're grappling with, and whilst our trial might not give us additional information in respect of the medical issues or the health issues, it certainly will give us information about our ability to manage areas with certain products, without certain products. And I think that information is very valuable. So I think it sets the right tone, a balanced way forward to progress down a path that could lead to broader outcomes that could have significant benefits for the community. And finally, I'd also just like to mention the work Councillor Hollingsworth mentioned, volunteer groups. Within my own ward, we've got the Back to Nettleton Friends groups, and they have regular scheduled working bees and the like, and they're planting native plants and pulling out weeds, etc., by hand. It's great work, and it does complement the work officers do. So look, I'll leave it there. I support the motion as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. So we'll return to Councillor Thompson to close the debate.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. Look, I know this is a bit of a challenge, and I certainly acknowledge that we're heading in the right direction with the officer's report. The intentions are certainly honourable and addresses the concerns that the community has with regards to glyphosate. If there was no concerns, we wouldn't be diluting the product. So I think the report actually acknowledges that there are community concerns to that end. With that said, if this motion fails by one vote, I will move Councillor Franco's suggestion that we restrict it to the southern portion of the site, and hopefully Councillor Hollingsworth might join to ensure that that is successful. But this doesn't go to the extent to say that, you know, we're committing ourselves to a full municipal-wide ban on glyphosate. It's simply suggesting that we do a trial of 12 months in some selective areas so that we have a clearer understanding of the costs in this, and also a clearer understanding of, you know, the amenity, perhaps impacts from changes to weeds. But it's also not suggesting that there is no weed management in those areas. There will be other options available to our officers to actually investigate. And the Deacon report certainly goes into different options that are available, including some that are not even mentioned in the Deacon report, such as goat animal grazing. And I look forward to seeing some goats along the Gardeners Creek Trail at some future point. There might be a budget bid specifically for goats in our municipality. I think we've got to understand this problem's not going to go away. And yes, we might have a particular view from an economic perspective, but we've also got our community view and sentiment that we need to balance. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is a change in community sentiment, if not a significant paradigm leap in community sentiment. And this is just part of what we're starting to see. And I think we've got to be proactive. We've got to have all the answers so that in 12 months' time, we can actually, without speculating to what the costs are, we actually will have real value and real details to which we can actually then pull forward a report, allow the community to review that report. We can hear back from the community and we can then make an informed decision. I think that's the most important thing that we can do on behalf of our community, is to do that process. So I would certainly encourage you all to support this. This is an investment in knowledge. We're not going to prove whether or not this product is safer or not safer. That's not our remit. But we can actually prove future decisions based on solid, sound details and information and the science that we can garner from trialling ourselves. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
And thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? So I'm counting 5. Those against?
I'll call a division.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Franco. So we'll put that motion again. Those in favour? Councillor Biggar, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gillies and Councillor Franco. I think that was all, and Councillor Gold. Those against? Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Park, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Watson and Councillor Addis, and Councillor Stafford, sorry. So that motion fails. So Councillor Thompson, I think you foreshadowed another motion.
I did, Madam Mayor, and trusting that Councillor Hollingsworth sees this amenable, is to amend that previous motion to reflect in item A, the Gardeners Creek waterway.
Maybe we should pause for a minute just to make sure. Is there a way that can just be defined as that, Councillor Thompson?
I think the intent's there, Madam Mayor, unless governance seeks to have that precisely described in the motion.
Perhaps we'll check with Mr. Shepherd if he thinks that's a doable way to manage it.
And if I get a seconder and someone's willing, Madam Mayor, I'm happy for that motion to be put.
Okay.
Obviously, that's not me calling for that, but I'm sure someone will.
Can we get a bit of officer advice just briefly to confirm that that is potentially a doable project?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the more detailed the description of the area can be, the better that would be for us, so that we know exactly where we're intending to have that trial area.
So, Madam Mayor, is it worth just putting up the previous motion and I can add the last, which would be very simple?
Let me just check if we've still got, yes, we have. Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, obviously B is self-explanatory, that's very specific. So it's A, ceasing the use of glyphosate for a trial period of 12 months along the Gardeners Creek waterway or Gardeners Creek corridor, commencing at the start of summer 2022 and concluding at the end of spring 2023. And Mr. Shepherd, is it better to say Gardeners Creek corridor?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Gardeners Creek corridor is good. It would also be useful if there was a distance from the waterway, for example, just to put a boundary on that.
50 metres from the waterway.
Let's, the point B, it would be similar.
Point B doesn't need to change, Madam Mayor, because it's very specific to a trial site.
Can I suggest, while you're formulating this motion, that the use of the registered trademark and brand name Starane is utterly inappropriate. It should be described by its chemical name rather than its brand name. That's like saying we won't eat Vegemite in the council chamber. I mean, it's just not appropriate.
Let's just check. Councillor Thompson, I'm assuming you're comfortable with that.
Madam Mayor, I'm just reflecting the officer's Appendix A, which says Starane Advanced Herbicide. So it's a reflection of what's in the officer's report. So I'm happy for that to stay as is, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Sinfield, you had a question or comment, and Councillor Watson too.
Thank you. Yeah, a question of either Councillor Thompson or officers. I'm not quite sure what a 50-metre corridor looks like from the waterway as to whether that is just the creek bank or whether it impacts on sports fields or what that 50-metre corridor might look like. So absent officer advice and a map, I'm a northerner and I'm not really familiar with what a 50-metre corridor down there looks like, frankly.
Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. I might go back to Mr. Shepherd. Is being that specific detrimental to giving discretion for the officers to look at the nuances of the boundary with Gardeners Creek? And therefore, if we left it as it was previously, would that actually give officers the ability to, you know, have a look at a 0 frontage and a 75-metre frontage as necessary?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would be useful if we can define the boundary in some way, even if that is just to say it's all open space adjoining Gardeners Creek corridor, so that we do have a clear boundary. And then there will be some open spaces, such as where Back Creek comes down to the Gardeners Creek, where we need to draw a line at some point to contain the trial area.
So can we change that to open space rather than 50 metres? And we need a road. Councillor Franco, do you know the road that cuts past Nettleton Park?
It's Gardeners. I'll come back to you in a moment. I do know the road. I walk down there regularly, but I'm not great with names. I'll tell you in a moment.
That's right.
Councillor Watson, you had a query. I think we are getting close to needing to suspend standing orders, but let's persevere once more and then we might need a motion.
It's along Back Creek to Gardner Parade.
Councillor Watson.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to share my concerns with fellow councillors with the direction that this is heading, simply because we're doing a trial area and part of Gardeners Creek is a boundary with another council. So given that we are doing an experiment, I think that I feel intensely uncomfortable about this because we haven't consulted or let Stonington Council know that we're doing this nature of a trial to seek their response to that. We also have a Kunung committee that I don't believe has been aware that a trial is proposed for this area. So
can I request that we suspend standing orders? Could somebody move?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Thompson. Thank you. Sorry, I'll go back to you, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you. So while I certainly prefer the prefer the direction of this second amendment, I still am more comfortable with the officer's recommendation. And given that we share a boundary with Stonington, I'm not. I just don't think it's reasonable to do this policy on the fly without consulting the community group. I think there's a committee, Kunung committee down there. We've got a strategy plan. Was this ever envisaged in the strategy plan? And most of all, I mean, what is Stonington Council? They might think that, and I can't put words into another council, but you know, what if they feel that noxious weeds won't be controlled in a suitable manner, and this is going to impact on their boundaries? So I'll leave my comments there.
Madam Mayor, that's added nothing to the motion that we're about to consider. So I'm just thinking that's something for debate if councillors want to debate it.
Now, Councillor Bigger, you had a question, or?
That was my question as well, was where we were going. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Councillor Franco, did you have a question?
Question for Councillor Thompson, if I may, Madam Mayor, in relation to the proposed motion. Councillor Watson has raised the issue of Stonington Council, and I wonder whether it's worth including in the motion that we write to Stonington Council to inform them to see if they wish to participate. It's an opportunity that they may wish to co-join, and if they don't, I mean, it certainly still provides a contrast in relation to the management of the two areas and provides perhaps a contrast. At the moment, they're managed separately anyway.
Councillor Thompson, I mean, my feeling is we would do that anyway, and whether we need to.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, each council's got their own herbicide weed management treatments. You know, I think if this were to pass, then I'm sure officers would write to Stonington, even if the substantive officer's recommendation passed, it's a change to our weed management practices, we'd write to Stonington.
Okay. Now, can I suggest did you have one more question, Councillor Franco? And then I think we should try and resume standing orders and return to a more formal process.
Yes, Councillor Thompson raised the issue of the road along Nettleton Park. It does change from Brixton Rise, Kerford Road, Gardner Parade. So it's quite a number. It's perhaps easier to just say the open space rather than defining the road as the boundary. That's my thought anyway, because otherwise we have to start naming many, many roads to try and create a very defined boundary.
Okay, so are people happy? Is somebody happy to move a motion to resume standing orders?
Point of order, the standing orders have not been suspended. A motion was moved and seconded and not put. So despite all the conduct that just happened, we were still governed by standing orders.
You are right.
So, Madam Mayor, can I have a look at the motion that it is in its current form, just to see if that's...
Yep. Are we ready to put it up?
So ceasing, this is A, along the Gardeners Creek corridor, Can we, sorry, officers, can we change 50 metres from waterway to Gardeners Creek corridor adjoining open space? That's it. Thank you. I think that will suffice for the time being. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
You're comfortable that that is your motion, Councillor Thompson?
Yep, that's the last one I'll put up.
Yep, okay. And Councillor Hollingsworth, are you seeking to second? Yes, thank you. So we have a mover
Sorry,
and a
just a question. Sorry, Gardeners Creek Waterway. I don't think waterways mentioned there. It's just Gardeners Creek open space. So I think it's important to actually put waterway open space rather than the whole precinct.
Was it Gardeners Creek corridor?
I think, yeah.
Maybe we need to put it back up on the screen and check.
Says Gardeners Creek corridor, which I think Mr. Shepherd said that was the more appropriate wording.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? Councillor Watson, are you got your hand up? Just no.
Yeah, I've put my hand up, not to second, but I was concerned about the issue Councillor Park raised about the word star aim, the use of the brand name, and wanted to have officer advice about whether that was or wasn't appropriate in that motion.
Okay. All right, let's get that and then we'll try to go to a more formal process. Mr. Storer, were you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that the appropriate thing for us to do is to refer to star aim as an organic compound, if that is the correct description. And Mr. Shepherd can confirm whether that's appropriate or not. We've avoided using the brand names associated with glyphosate, and clearly there are some brand names that are. So I think that we should avoid using the word star rain as a single product. There are other products, as Councillor Thompson mentioned earlier, which might achieve a similar outcome to that referred to by star rain. So maybe perhaps Mr. Thompson, if you can, Mr. Shepherd, if you can confirm that the correct description might be an organic compound, or is there some other means by which you would describe star rain?
Thank you. There's an active ingredient in starane, fluoxyper, so I think it would be most appropriate to use that in the resolution.
Mr. Storer, I actually missed that comment from Mr. Shepherd.
I couldn't hear what Mr. Shepherd said, I'm sorry.
Apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There is an active ingredient in starane, which is fluoxyper, so I think it would be appropriate to use that in the motion.
Okay, so we haven't got a seconder as yet, Madam Mayor, so I'm happy to make that change if that's...
Yep.
We might need the correct
do
spelling
we need
of
it
that.
spelled? Yes. I think we've
Fluoxyper, is that the name?
Yes.
F-L-U-O-F-L-U-R-O-X-Y-P-Y-R.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We appear to have lost Councillor Stavro along the way. I've just received a text from him saying that he's having internet issues. So just for your awareness before we head to the vote.
Okay. Can we pause for a moment?
Should we move a motion to suspend standing orders and
we could adjourn?
Adjourn briefly. Thank you. Is somebody happy to move a motion to? Yes, and we have a Councillor Park and Councillor Sinfield. Who's in favour? Those in favour of a brief adjournment. Thank you. That appears to be carried. Thank you. So we'll adjourn briefly. We'll hope it's fine, just a few minutes. So welcome back, everyone. Councillor Park, you're happy to move a motion to resume? Yes. Thank you. And seconded, I think I saw Councillor Sinfield.
Certainly.
And is anyone opposed to us resuming? Okay, so we'll declare that as carried. Thank you. Councillor Thompson, we were working on your motion.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do have a motion. Very quickly, if the officers can pull it up so I can just explain the slight nuance difference. And that's a change in the word to 1A, which reflects for a 12-month period along the Gardeners Creek corridor, in brackets adjoining open space. That's the only change from the previous motion that failed. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
And did we change the chemical listing?
Oh, yeah, you're correct. And it's changing from the word styrane to the active ingredient, fluroxapyr. I think that's the pronunciation of it, but that's the correct spelling of the product. So that's more specific.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So is somebody happy to second that? Councillor Bigger?
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm assuming there are people against that motion? Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'm happy, unless no other councillors wish to debate, that the motion's put, Madam Mayor.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sinfield would. So, Councillor Thompson, I'll return to you, given that there is someone. Would you like to speak to it?
No, I think the debate was had in the previous one, and I might round out any comments from Councillor Sinfield.
Yep, Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief, but essentially I'm really concerned that there's no community consultation about this. We've heard from some in the community who are concerned about the use of glyphosate and other such chemicals, but there's been no consultation on this motion. This motion has not been part of the paper that has gone out and been circulated, unlike the officer recommendation. It's unfair to a portion of our community, a significant portion of our community, who would prefer what the officers are proposing, and that's the restrained use of chemical application in appropriate locations. And I think this policy on the fly in response to a vocal group is fraught. I stand by my earlier comments and entirely trust the officer judgment on the restrained use of glyphosate and any other such comments, chemicals. And I really think that this is particularly unfair, and unfair also to try and wedge a colleague by calling them out in the previous debate. So I'll leave my comments there, and this will likely pass, but I think that policy on the fly is not the right thing by our community.
Thank you. Councillor Bigger, you were the seconder. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I'll speak only briefly because I didn't speak last time, and say that I did support the last motion, and I do support this. I don't think that I don't see this as this is not a definitive issue. It's not that there's been proven to be certainly to be no risk for glyphosate. We know there is. There are concerns about soil microbiome. There are concerns about bees and biodiversity. And so the idea that will there be a financial cost with this trial? Yes, moderate. Is there a potential cost to human and environmental health if we don't seek to find safer options for our community? Yes, absolutely. And health is something we cannot get back once we lose it, the health of our environment or our own health. And so to me, while some councillors have said that our community cares immensely about how much we weed, and how vigilant we are about that, I think Burundara is a community that cares enormously about how we care for our planet and our own health. And so do I think this is a money worth spending to find out whether or not this is something we can manage in a more effective and a safer way? Yes, I absolutely do, and I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Can we just pause for a moment? I think we've lost Councillor Stavro again. Just let me check.
I'm happy to move an adjournment. I think this could drag on.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Thompson? Yes. Anyone opposed to a brief adjournment? No. Okay. Well, look, I'm sorry to the community. We'll try to be as quick as we can. So welcome back, Councillor Park. You're moving a motion to resume, and Councillor Thompson seconding. I'm assuming nobody's opposing that. Thank you. So the meeting is now resumed. Now we heard from Councillor Bigger. Would anyone else like to speak? No. So Councillor Thompson, you said you might wrap it up.
Just very briefly to Councillor Sinfield's comments. This report's come to us in a council meeting where our community struggles to engage with us. They're not able to present to us. They were not able to ask them questions, nor are officers able to actually respond in a public forum to questions that the residents might present. But the motion that's on the table now actually seeks to do just what you were seeking, which is to actually engage with the community. So to bring it to a services meeting. Very happy for the community to engage with us on this one because it's a very important topic. Maybe not in all parts of the municipality, but it certainly is along the southern corridor. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Happy for it to be put.
Thank you very much. So we'll now put that motion. All those in favour? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those against? So that motion is carried.
I'll call a division.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion again. Those in favour? Councillor Bigger, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Franco, Councillor Gold. And those against? Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavro and Councillor Addis. So thank you, councillors. And thank you, officers. So we'll now go to item 7.2, which is contract number 2022/53, Lewin Reserve, New Pavilion Building Works. And I believe that's going to be introduced by Prudence Ho, the project architect. Thanks, Ms. Ho.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The existing sports pavilion at Lewin Reserve is in poor condition and it no longer meets the needs of its users, nor caters for the increase in female participation in community sport. In 2020, a 2-storey pavilion design was proposed and community feedback at the time identified several design elements that were to be reviewed. This has resulted in an updated single-storey proposal, and this has been carefully developed in consultation with the various tenant sporting clubs, as well as a community reference group, giving consideration to the project budget. In June 2022, a request for tender was issued to 5 shortlisted suppliers from the construction supplier register. There was one withdrawing due to insufficient capacity to resource the tender submission. The 4 submissions that were received were evaluated against the qualitative criteria that was established by the tender evaluation panel, as well as the tender pricing that was submitted. During the design process, cost estimates were provided from the project quantities FAIA at each stage of the project. Pre-tender cost estimate was provided in May, and that was an anticipated tender figure of 2.64 million. An updated estimate was then provided in July during the tender period with an updated figure of 3.03 million. The recommended tender price is 3.62 million. This highlights that the July cost plan was underestimated with the lowest tender amount. Please also note there is a minor discrepancy between the confidential report which has the correct budget compared to the council report, which does not show the $200,000 from the 21 to 22 forecast budget. Overall, market cost escalation has been rapid, and risks associated with material supply, transport delays and fuel costs, as well as staffing shortages, is being reflected in actual tender pricing. The preferred contractor's tender submission has demonstrated a clear capability in delivering this project and has provided a program that is in line with council's expectations. The works are expected to commence in September, with the completion date by mid-2023. The total cost of this contract is $3,620,313, which is excluding GST. Council's project budget available for the 22-23 financial year is $2,357,669. A grant from the Victorian Government through the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund of $800,000 provides a total project budget of $3,157,669. The total project cost, which includes consultancy fees, contract contingency, sum allowance and authority fees, has a budget shortfall of $877,478. This tender demonstrates the reality of the construction market at this point in time. Despite this, officers recommend to proceed with this project, given the detailed consultation that has been undertaken with the clubs and community to date, the likelihood of ongoing cost escalations in the future, and community outcomes from the project as scoped. Savings from the renewal program of $500,000 has been identified without significant impact on the overall asset renewal program. The remaining funding shortfall of $377,478 will be addressed by the October amended budget process. Overall, the delivery of the new sports pavilion will have a positive impact on the community, providing a facility that responds to increased female participation in community sport, along with improved accessibility. The current pavilion is in poor condition, and the new facility will provide fit-for-purpose use. The pavilion has also been designed to ensure that no additional stormwater will be impacting the northern end of the oval. Substantial rainwater tanks for the building has been allowed for, and that will collect stormwater from the roof, which will be used to flush the toilets in the pavilion. Any runoff around the building will also be captured by several new pits connected to a new pipe leading to the legal point of discharge on the oval. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Ho. Questions from councillors. Councillor Franco.
No questions, but I'd like to foreshadow a motion.
Thanks, Councillor Franco. Any other questions? Councillor Biggett.
Thank you. Look, I do have a question, and it's maybe an unfair one, and maybe I should put it to Mr. Freer, if I'm going to put it. But that is just, I guess my concern is, unsurprisingly, about the significant cost increases that we're seeing, and maybe it's a question that you'd require, sort of a crystal ball. But is there any sense in the industry, about these? We're seeing incredibly steep price increases. Obviously, we don't know exactly how long that's going to continue, but we wouldn't want to jump in at the top, would we? And I'm just wondering if we have any sense of whether or not there's any benefit in pushing out some of these things.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. You're happy to provide a response?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, officers are acutely aware of this and are preparing a report at this point in time to bring to council, looking at the balance of our program. This is the first of our substantive building projects to have gone to tender and proposing an award at this period of time, with the balance looking more likely towards the end of this calendar year. We have taken recommendations from a range of quantity surveyors and project managers. The escalations, as you can see, specifically here in about an 8-week period, have been quite substantial. There's not an indication at this point that they are going down at all. All indicators are saying that there will be a continued increase of anywhere between 8 to 10% for the balance of this year, and in the 23-24 and 24-25 a reduction of that increase, but not a reduction in price at all at that point in time. So unfortunately, it's a very difficult market at this point. It would appear building construction are more exposed than any of our other construction markets at the moment. For instance, our roads and footpath budgets are not being impacted by anywhere near this amount, particularly around building materials.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Mayor, just one more.
Thank you.
It really is sort of following on from that, I guess, but so by referring the additional 377,000, I think it was, to the September amended budget process, there's obviously a chance that that wouldn't be approved at that point, but we're signing contracts for this now. Is that correct?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. We would anticipate to bring that to the council later this year and seeking to award the contract tonight. Yes, this would effectively bind council to a contract, and officers would need to bring that to council at that point, giving respect to the full budget picture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I'd be inclined to oppose this, except that I presume that the grant income has a defined window. I'd be interested to know what that is, but that's probably, for me, the only thing that means that I probably have to support it. But
Mr. Freer, are you happy to?
I might, if Madam Mayor, if I can defer to the project team whether they are aware of the detail of that grant, or from Ms McLean. I understand it's a Sport and Recreation Victoria grant. I'm not personally aware of the terms of the finalisation of that grant.
Ms Ho, did...
Yes. To be honest, I'm not 100% across that either, Madam Mayor. I do believe that usually is tied to certain construction years, but I can find out further information.
Thank you. Ms McLean, are you able to help us at all with that?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I do believe that construction does need to commence in this financial year. We always have the ability to keep Sport Rec Victoria up to date in terms of any challenges that we might face towards construction. So I don't believe that that will be a difficulty for council.
Thank you. Councillor.
Mayor, if I might just ask one more, and it's probably more to the CEO. It's been foreshadowed that there'll be discussions about capital works projects. I mean, are we unfairly disadvantaging some of those that are to be discussed by considering this tonight in isolation?
Mr. Storer?
Yes, very Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Park asked a very fair question. I guess the issue we've got here is that we do have a grant from the government which does offset the cost council would otherwise be contributing to the project, and I think that that plus the degree to which this project has actually gone through quite extensive community consultation and has brought the community along would cause me to say that in this case we probably should proceed as recommended. However, I need to be quite upfront in acknowledging that this program is going to experience these challenges, and we are going to have conversations with councillors about whether there are projects which will either drop out or have to be extended into the future in order to respond to the capital increases which we are experiencing. Part of that conversation may well be whether you believe that it's appropriate to be undertaking significant capital works at all right now. And whether you take the view that perhaps we're better to sit back and wait for the market to stabilise in the hope that it does. So these are all the questions we're going to have to work through with you. So I think the responses questioning this are perfectly sensible. However, I do think that we've gone far enough down this path on this one to have to bring it to a conclusion and to capitalise on the grant money which is actually available.
Thanks, Mr. Storer. Councillor Park, does that?
It does, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Two questions in one. Firstly, what's the period of time between now and the September amended budget that we need to make a decision? And in that, what's the tender validity period of this tender price? So in other words, if we've got to wait, is there no tender that we can accept anyway?
So I can respond in regards to the tender price. The contractor was willing to hold that price until the contract was awarded tonight. So they did mention after the end of August, they had the right to revisit that price that was provided.
Thanks for that. And I'm suspecting it's buying a lottery ticket to see if prices come down in the future. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions before we return to Councillor Franco for his motion? No. So, Councillor Franco, you foreshadowed a motion.
The officer's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson, you're happy to second that? Thank you. And can I check, is anyone opposed to that motion? I can't see anyone opposed. So, Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to make some comments. Thank you for clarifying to the officers for clarifying the error in the report. There's a good news story and a bad news story in this report, and we've started discussing the bad news story. The cost escalations, and they're real, and they concern us all in relation to our capital works budget going forward. And I was certainly very uneasy when I saw the results and the rapidly rising escalation costs, and I think we're facing them going forward. I think if we delay now and push forward, we potentially face higher costs rather than lower costs, and we risk the grant, which is very significant in terms of offsetting some of the cost. In terms of the good news story, there's a very important story to tell in relation to this pavilion and this project, and I can't begin to say how pleased I am with the work of officers in this regard. They turned what was a bad news story before the last election, a large bulky design for a two-storey pavilion was developed. It met with a huge community outcry, and we've gotten to the point where we have a community completely in support, with officers who've just worked phenomenally in consultation. I specifically want to single out two officers. It's not just limited to these two, Tom Scanlon and Prudence Ho, but they've been superb, and they've worked just very effectively and very thoughtfully with a community reference group that was established. It's the 4 people on the community, 4 residents on the community reference group: David Williams, Marie Felsberg, Gavin Watson, and Stephen Hare. And it's worth understanding this pavilion and Lewin Reserve is situated in a very tight-knit small community bounded by major roads and facilities. So it's a small community within the Gardeners Creek catchment, bounded by Gardeners Creek, Toorak Road, Burke Road, and the Taronga Village. It's very small, and Lewin Reserve is the green heart of that community. And it's a very popular park, very popular with dog walkers. It's an off-leash facility there. It has junior sports happening there, and it's it's a community that's cares very much about their local park. It's their backyard, if you like, and they're very active and very involved and very happy. After being very unhappy with council, now they're delighted. And I just think it goes to show the work that council management put in place and revised the way we went about it. And looking at the facility, the design refinements have been superb. We've actually reduced the scale of the pavilion significantly. It's gone from a 2-story pavilion with large scale facilities with a large pitch roof to a 1-story pavilion that sits embedded in the landscape, much more seamless. It provides community benefits beyond the sporting groups that'll be of value to the local community, to the dog walkers and the like. It has a flat roof which provides a vantage point that you can walk straight out seamlessly with a vista across the park. It provides bleachers that broader members of the community can use to both access the park and to sit and peacefully enjoy the recreational facilities there. It's very heavily used, as I say, by dog walkers outside sporting times. And yeah, look, it's something that's very, very rewarding seeing the work that's being done. And I hope that going through into the construction phase, I share the concerns that have been raised about the cost, but it does provide very significant design improvements. It's quite unique in terms of the way we've gone about it. It really lowers the impact. It has some very significant environmental benefits. I mean, we heard from Prudence Ho about the rainwater tanks, about the stormwater is a major issue in this area, and we've put stormwater arrangements to mitigate flooding in the area. So these are significant benefits. It's a much smaller development than it could have been. So let's appreciate that. And I think to understand where we've come from, a community that was very hostile to this, being very supportive and having these broader design benefits, a very innovative, creative design from what was very bulky and ungainly design that created awkward open spaces and design impediments to vistas to the park for the broader community. They've all been addressed, and it is quite significant, the work that's gone into it. And it's just wonderful to see that collaboration between the community and council and working with the community and getting the sporting clubs to even agree to the reduced facilities, if you want to see them that way, a much more seamless, but a much more picturesque setting that will ultimately be achieved. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Franco. Now it isn't opposed, so Councillor Thompson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, it's unopposed, Madam Mayor, so I'm happy for it to be put.
Okay, and Councillor Franco, are you happy for me not to return to you, but to put the motion? Thank you. So all those in favour? Those against? Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now go to item 7.3, which is state government cost shifting to local government. And that's going to be introduced by Scott Walker, Director, Urban Living. Thanks, Mr. Walker.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Happy to introduce this report. The purpose of this report is to outline the key issues and implications of cost shifting from state and federal government to local government. The report also outlines the primary cost shifts impacting local government at the moment. And whilst this report is being presented by myself, it is really a collaborative effort from many areas across council, because cost shifting impacts right across so many different areas. So I also acknowledge the work of the wider executive team in coordinating the various inputs for this report. And when we have questions later on, I might need to bring in those wider executive team to help answer those questions if there are any. Cost shifting occurs when the responsibility for, or merely the cost of, providing a certain service, concession, asset, or regulatory function is shifted from one sphere of government to another without corresponding funding or revenue raising ability required to deliver that new responsibility. And cost shifting can occur and does occur from the federal government, but more significant is the cost shift from the Victorian state government to local government. It's been a major financial issue for many years. Cost shifting has been around for quite some time, but it's fluctuated over the years in terms of the impacts, and it can really impact on the ability to deliver services and local government's financial sustainability. Council's revenue sources are limited. They're coming primarily from rates and charges, and to a lesser extent, grants, user fees and charges, and statutory fees and fines. And therefore, rate capping is another issue which really compounds the impact of cost shifting. And rate capping has prevented councils from increasing their rates beyond the rate cap set by the state government since 2016. So the cap's been in place since 2016, and it's generally been based on or close to CPI. I don't believe it's been above 2.5%, and for the current financial year, it's capped at 1.75%. But as we know, the costs for local government have been increasing substantially more than CPI over a number of years. And there's a couple of real factors for that. That's firstly because we have very high costs on staff, and staffing costs are increasing above CPI, but also delivery costs for infrastructure, which is the other big component for local government. And we just heard the example of the Lewin Reserve Pavilion, and Daniel Freer talked about a report coming which highlights this increasing cost of infrastructure at the moment, which is well and beyond the 1.75 cap that we have at the moment. So the effects of rate capping will continue to diminish the ability to deliver services and infrastructure renewal needs into the future. And this means that the cost shifting is a really significant issue which will impact the financial sustainability of the municipality and in fact all councils. And cost shifting is happening in a number of areas: libraries, school crossing supervision, maternal child health, early years, building reform, urban planning, social housing, landfill levy and waste services, infrastructure projects that we just talked about, urban stormwater, electrical line clearance, environment protections, climate change response and mitigations, road network projects, state road amenity maintenance, disaster response and recovery compliance, and many other indirect costs. What we're proposing in the recommendation here really is a key acknowledgement of the cost shifting issues and what the implications of cost shifting are, to bring it to the attention of the community and to yourselves. But we also are recommending that we bring future reports back to council where significant cost shifts are identified into the future, and as we have done in the past, but really to bring those to your attention, raise the issues with the Municipal Association of Victoria, the state government, local MPs and other councils as well. And also specifically subject to this decision this evening, it's joining a campaign that's being led by Monash Council at the moment in relation to the specific issue of school crossing supervision program, and really concerns about the sustainability of that program and the support being provided by the state government for councils where there are significant increases in costs occurring. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to take any questions and seek the assistance of my ELT colleagues in answering those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Councillors, questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Notice that this is an advocacy. Are we completely sure that this isn't an underlying component of work that actually leads to various numbers of councils increasing rates? Because I certainly wouldn't want to be doing that.
To yourself, Madam Mayor, that is a potential implication that we need to consider. What is the impact of removing the rate cap? Would there be an increase in rates to account for the changes that perhaps occur because of the cost shift? And I don't think that's necessarily what's being put forward here or what's being recommended. But what it is an acknowledgement of the impact of saying to councils that you actually have a rate cap and you're capped, but we're also going to shift costs because of changes that we're making to you and expect you to accommodate those without a change in the cap. And I think that's the point that's being made here, that there's a holding down with one hand by the state government, but then also a shifting on and an expectation that councils can simply find the money elsewhere to accommodate those cost shifts that are occurring.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? No. So is somebody happy to move a motion? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Park, you've got your hand up to second. Thank you. And for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? Councillor Franco, you're opposed? Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Hollingsworth to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. As the State Council member for Boroondara on the Municipal Association of Victoria, I have the opportunity to attend State Council meetings along with the 79 other representatives of Victoria's councils. So this isn't something that is just exclusive to Boroondara. All councils across Boroondara are experiencing this, as Mr. Walker has just explained, and it covers every directorate in council, and obviously the officer's report is very comprehensive and outlines all the areas that we as council and collective councils are struggling at the moment to meet the demands in community expectation, to deliver not just essential services, but obviously exemplary services to support our community, which includes an item that was discussed before, which is the renewal of sports pavilions. So there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of services, there's a lot of maintenance and renewal, and with the reduced cap on rates, it is difficult to deliver all services and meet expectation. So I definitely support advocacy, and my support for this is not based on any political party. It is just on the merits of needing adequate financial support, whether it be grants or the ability to set a rate that is deemed necessary to keep Boroondara viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Park, as the seconder, would you like to speak or reserve your right?
I'm happy to reserve my right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Look, I'm a little bit torn in how to deal with this report, and I support much of what the report says, and I'm concerned about cost shifting, but I don't support a removal of rate capping. And the fact that the report considers the removal of rate capping as an option just makes me distinctly uncomfortable about supporting it from that point of view. The other aspects I very much endorse. And I'll just make a comment on that. I just think rate capping, and look, I appreciate, I heard Mr. Walker's comments in relation to it being one of the options that can be considered. It's not necessarily the sole option, but it's there. And I do think rate capping sets a benchmark and a framework for local government to not go beyond and to consider. Now, that's exacerbated by factors, rising costs. It's exacerbated by cost shifting from state government. But to be part of a chorus, to join in potentially to call for the abolition of rate capping just makes me very, very uneasy. And so if it was clear that we're not advocating the removal of rate capping, then I'd be willing to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I saw Councillor Park and then Councillors Watson's hands up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And that was the primary reason I wanted to reserve my right to hear, because on the face of it, I think this is a a no-brainer that you would support this. Although I agree entirely with what Councillor Franco said about rate capping, and in fact, I think it's proven to be a good thing because it imposes upon councils a level of constraint that in years past hasn't been there. I don't just mean Burundara, I'm talking, frankly, Australia-wide. So I wonder if the mover would consider an amendment, and what I'd propose is just an amendment to paragraph 1 to remove the words especially in the context of rate capping.
Yes, so Councillor Hollingsworth, can you see the motion? Would you be comfortable to?
Look, I'd just like Councillor Park to finish his comment, or have you finished, Councillor Park?
Well, essentially I've finished in that it'd simply be the removal of the words, especially in the context of rate capping. The rest of it, so that paragraph 1 would then read, write to the Premier of Victoria, Daniel Andrews, expressing concern about the extent of cost shifting from the state government to local government, limiting council's ability to meet the future operational and infrastructure needs of its community. So I think the motion loses nothing by the deletion of those words, but what it gains is that it's clear that we're not advocating for removal of the rate cap.
Look, thank you for clarifying that. I would be happy to accept that because listening to Councillor Franco's comments, whilst I have faith that Burundara Council would be very fiscally responsible with any rate cap setting and aware of obviously the economic situation and impact on our residents, I agree that there is merit in taking out what you've just recommended. So I would support that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we now have a slightly modified motion, and Councillor Park, I'm assuming you're happy to remain as seconder, given that you made the suggestion.
Yes. And I won't speak further to it, but I would hope that might take away any remaining opposition and hopefully not create any new opposition.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Thompson, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah, it was exactly where Councillor Park went, Madam Mayor, and I'm very happy with the change. It was on reflection of Councillor
Franco.
Oh, it's late on a Monday night, isn't it?
Councillor Franco's comment.
Councillor Franco's question. I do apologise.
Thank you. Yeah, we're all feeling a bit fragile. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion we now have? No. So look, I'll return to Councillor Hollingsworth if you wish to add anything to close the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to thank Councillor Franco for his contribution and Councillor Park for putting forward the amendment to the motion. And I hope my colleagues support what is now proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? So that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the officers for such a comprehensive, excellent report. Thank you. So we're now going to, if I've got it read correctly, I think it's 7.7, because the others in between have been moved on block. So item 7.7 is proposed sale of the rear of 218 to 224 High Street Q, and I believe that's going to be introduced by Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to consider a proposed sale of council-owned land located at the rear of 218 to 224 High Street Q. The land is 211 square metres in size and resembles two joined triangular shapes The land has been owned by council since 1982 and is currently leased to the owner of 218 to 224 High Street Q for use as a car park. A request to purchase this land was made by the owner of 218 to 224 High Street. The potential consolidation of the council land with the adjoining owner's parent title would allow for possible future development of the site. Any future development would require a planning permit, and parking requirements would be considered as part of the process in accordance with the Boroondara planning scheme. Officers have advised that parking in the area is sufficient for current demands. Given the suite of planning controls that relate to the site, future land uses and development will be restricted and controlled in line with objectives consistent with other sites within the Q Activity Centre. Based on the size and location of the land, and due to this having limited independent development potential, it is proposed to sell the land by private treaty to the adjoining owner at 218 to 224 High Street Q at market value plus council's associated costs, as detailed in the officer recommendation in the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Montalti. Questions, councillors? Councillor Stavro?
No questions, Madam Mayor, just foreshadow a motion.
Thank you. Let me just check if there's any other questions. No, so Councillor Stavro, your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Sinfield? Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? No, thank you. So we'll go to you, Councillor Stavro, to speak to your motion.
Look, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, there's not really a lot to say. There's an extensive analysis that put to us, and the way that those irregular shapes are looking and what further use they can be put to would appear to be limited. This is a good opportunity that council officers are putting in front of us. I take comfort with the overall planning restrictions that Ms Montalti put to us, and on that basis, I recommend to my colleagues the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, given that it's not opposed, are you happy not to speak?
I'm happy to not speak.
Thank you. Councillor Stavro, is there anything else you'd like to say before we put the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? And those against? Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We're making up some time. So we'll now go to 7.9, which is discontinuance of road reserves policy. And again, I believe that's going to be introduced by Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you, Ms Montalti.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. This report recommends council adopt the updated discontinuance of roads and reserves policy, which is attached in the report you have before you. This policy documents how roads and reserves no longer reasonably required for access, no longer required for the purpose for which they were originally set aside, or roads being closed for any other purpose will be discontinued and sold or transferred. Within the adopted policy, there is no differentiation between sale of road reserves, regardless of whether they are situated at the front, rear or side of properties, and as such it could be assumed that the policy applies to all sales of this type of land. To provide absolute clarity, the updated policy specifically calls out the location of road reserves to which this policy applies. Further amendments to the policy include the application of additional considerations when dealing with land located at the frontage of a property, with reference to assessing whether the land has a public purpose to which it could be utilised, as opposed to selling it to the abutting owner, for example, for indented parking or enhanced tree canopy. The insertion of Principle 5, providing council with the option to sell the land by any method allowed within the provisions of the Local Government Act 2020, where no agreement can be reached between adjoining property owners. An updated sale consideration under Principle 2. The sale consideration has been amended to market value to recognise that no adverse possession rights apply to council titled land and length of occupation has no bearing on entitlement. An updated sale consideration under Principle 3. The sale consideration has been amended to $11,000 to reflect the current cost of an adverse possession claim. And finally, some updated and additional definitions in section 6.2 of the policy. Council adoption of the updated policy will provide clear parameters for officers to work within when considering any proposed discontinuance and possible sale of roads and reserves to which this policy applies. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Montalti. Are there any questions for officers, councillors? Thank you. Councillor Park.
The full shadow motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, so I think we're back to you, Councillor Park, for your motion.
Thank you. Just the officer's recommendation.
And Councillor Thompson, I think your hand went up first, although I can see Councillor Golds as well.
I'm very happy to second.
Okay, thank you. And for the mover and the seconder's benefit, is anyone opposed to that motion? No, so I'll return to you, Councillor Park.
Thank you. I don't see the need to speak to this. I think the policy is self-explanatory and a big improvement on the previous one.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Thompson, you're happy to, yep. You're happy for me to put the motion now, Councillor Park? Thank you. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now, our next item is 7.11, discontinuance and sale of road reserve fronting 35 McShane Street, Balwyn North. And Councillor Watson, you foreshadowed a conflict?
I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. In accordance, I would like to declare a conflict of interest under section 127 of the Local Government Act 2020. The property is very close to my own, and I also have a piece of land that the status of which is unclear for me right now. So I'll take my exit from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get you back when we've done this item. Just pause for a moment. Thank you. Thank you. So, Ms Montalti, you're going to introduce this, I believe?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, this report is to consider commencement of the statutory procedures to discontinue and sell 3.05 metres of road reserve fronting 35 McShane Street, Balwyn North. Council received a request from the owner of 35 McShane Street for the discontinuance and sale of road reserve fronting their property, as shown detailed in the attachments to the report. The owners have constructed a new family home and are unable to replace the existing front fence to secure the property, as the fence sits within the road reserve and is not included within the title boundary. The section of road reserve is considered by officers to be no longer required for public access or for any other public purpose, and has been enclosed within the adjoining property for in excess of 15 years. Consultation has been undertaken with relevant council departments and external service authorities, as detailed in section 5 of the report, resulting in no objection to the proposed sale. Adjoining owners have also been notified of the proposal, and to date no objections have been received. The report has been prepared applying the principles contained within the Discontinuance of Road and Reserves Policy 2021. Discussions with the landowners have also proceeded in good faith in accordance with that policy, as opposed to any changes under consideration. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you have a question?
Yeah, just through you, is this similar to a ransom strip, this land parcel?
Revenge.
Was that the intention?
I don't believe so. I understand that the strip of land, when the original subdivision plan was set out on paper, the roads were drawn wider than the standard width. And when the roads and nature strips were physically built, the roads were built to standard size, hence leaving a portion of road reserve not included in the title boundary. I hope that made sense, that explanation.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. That's satisfies you?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to foreshadow a motion, Madam Mayor, as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Park, you had your hand.
I was just going to foreshadow a motion too, but that's fine. I think the term for which Councillor Thompson was searching is revenge strip. Not sure what a ransom strip is.
Pretty much the same. Okay. So, Councillor Thompson, you've moved the motion. Councillor Park, are you seconding on that basis? Thank you very much. Is anyone opposed to that motion? No. So, Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to?
Look, I'm happy, obviously, just to move the officer's recommendation. There is a definition for a ransom strip, as distinct from a revenge strip within the Planning and Environment Act. So I think but for all intents and purposes, I think this is the rightful sale of this land to these owners for the purposes that they need. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Park, you're happy for us to put the motion? Thank you. And Councillor Thompson, you don't wish to add anything? Thank you. So it's the officer's recommendation. So all those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So we'll now move to, we need to get Councillor Watson back in. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Watson. So we're now up to item 8, general business. Now the first item is we have Councillors Watson, Thompson and Bigger who have requested retrospective leave of absence. So Councillor Watson's is for Monday, 11th of July, 2022. Councillor Thompson, Monday, 1st of August, 2022. And Councillor Bigger, Monday, 18th of July and Monday, 25th of July. So I'm suggesting that we consider all of these together. Now, the three of you, can I confirm that you're going to declare a conflict of interest? They have?
Yep. Do you want us to state the conflict?
Did you have, you had your hand up, I believe? No. Yes, thank you, Councillor Thompson.
It's a material conflict in accordance with section 128 of the Act.
Okay. And Councillor Bigger and Watson, similar for you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Same thing, thank you.
Thank you. So let's pause while we remove you from the meeting briefly. Thank you, everyone. So is anyone prepared to move a motion? Councillor Park.
Happy to move the motion granting leave to each of the three councillors.
Retrospectively, thank you. And Councillor Hollingsworth, you're happy to second?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Is anyone opposed before we put the motion? No? I'm assuming you don't wish to speak to it, Councillor Park? No, thank you. So those in favour of granting those leaves? Anyone against? You're against, Councillor Stavry? No? Can we just do it again? Those in favour of granting the leave? Thank you. And Councillor Franco, you're in favour? Yep, Thank you. Okay. I think we saw everyone's hands up that time. Anyone against? No. Thank you. So that motion is carried to grant the leave. And we'll just pause again while we get everyone back in. And we're just waiting for Councillor Bigger.
I am here.
Oh,
but I can't be seen.
Let me pause for a moment. I think IT are going to contact you. Oh, here we are. You're back on. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have some other foreshadowed items of general business. I believe Councillor Watson and Stavro, you and Councillor Sinfield, and I think there's a couple of others. So Councillor Watson.
I'm not sure what is being foreshadowed here, Madam Mayor.
Okay, let's go to Councillor Stavro first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As part of our code of conduct, someone that is endorsed as a candidate in our upcoming election needs to inform their colleagues, and I'm doing precisely that. I have been endorsed as a candidate in the upcoming November election for the Liberal Party in the Southern Metro region. And in doing so, I think I discharge my obligations to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Stavro. Mr. Storer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Watson would need to do the same thing. She may have missed the email, so it might be appropriate for her to be able to actually make the same observation.
Thank you. You happy to make that observation?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And missed the email. I actually thought I'd already done it, but given that that's not the case, I'll make the same declaration as Councillor Stavro, that I've been endorsed by the Liberal Party as a candidate for the lower house seat of Ringwood for this upcoming election in November 26, 2022.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. I believe we don't need to do anything further than have it declared. Thank you. So, Councillor Sinfield, you have an item of general business?
Thank you, I do. I've actually had a second one come to my attention, so apologies for the lack of notice to everybody, but I'll keep it brief. My first is in relation to the Boroondara Eagles Football Club's success, and I'd like to extend my congratulations to the Boroondara Eagles Football Soccer Club. First of all, congratulations to their head coach, Manny Katroulis, on a major milestone over the weekend: 100 games, 73 wins, 15 draws, 12 losses, 3 men's titles and 3 women's titles. But also congratulations to the men's team promoted to the National Premier League, which is a massive milestone. And the women's team has been promoted too, but I'm not sure into which league. So congratulations to the club and its 650 odd players, who are a great success story of community sport in our community. The second matter is in relation to the recent passing of Judith Durham AO. Now, Judith Durham was in fact born Judith Mavis Cock on the 3rd of July 1943, and Judith needs little introduction as one of Australia's most recognisable voices. However, that would be an injustice. She was a national treasure, an Australian singer, songwriter, musician who became the lead singer of the Australian folk music group The Seekers in 1963. Judith was a Boroondara local, and while born on the other side of the city, she moved here as a teenager and lived with her family in Georgian Court in Balwyn, and just near Balwyn Park, from 1956. It was at this time that she attended Wrighton Girls' School in Kew, graduating in 1960. Judith participated in many aspects of Wrighton life as a student. She is fondly remembered as a lead chorister in Madrigals, a small and special senior choir at Wrighton, and regularly playing piano for school assembly. Judith was a valued alumna of Wrighton and a pioneer of women's music in Australia. Judith was a successful solo artist and lead singer of the Seekers, as I said before, selling more than 50 million records worldwide. In 1968, Judith and fellow members of the Seekers were named jointly as Australians of the Year. In 1995, they were also recognised with a Medal of the Order of Australia. Among her many achievements, Judith was inducted to the ARIA Hall of Fame in 1995. In 2003, Rotary International invested Durham as a Paul Harris Fellow in recognition of her extensive work on behalf of charities. She was made an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2014 for distinguished service to the performing arts as an entertainer. Judith was inducted into the Music Victoria Awards Hall of Fame in 2015 and the Australian Women in Music Honour Roll in 2019. Judith passed away in palliative care in Melbourne on the 5th of August, aged 79. Her memory and unmistakable tone will live on in her numerous hit songs for many generations to come, and I would suggest one of the favourites, certainly here at Boroondara, is I Am Australian, just one of them, and I dare others will have more to say on that shortly. The tributes have been rightfully plentiful for this icon, and a state funeral is forthcoming, but a date not yet set. My thoughts are with her sister Beverly Sheehan, another local, extended family, bandmates, the Wrighton community, and friends left behind at this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Hollingsworth, you had an item of general business?
I do, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just want to follow on from Councillor Sinfield's comments and thank her for the lovely words she's just spoken of Judith Durham. So I wanted to talk about the celebration of 3 lives, 3 Victorian lives of remarkable humanitarians, and obviously Judith Durham was the first that has passed in recent time. And not only do we all love and know the I Am Australian, and it's certainly an iconic song for many of us that acknowledges all cultures and unites all of us, but in 2009, Judith also worked with a Yotta Yotta man called Kucha Edwards and wrote the words to a slightly tweaked version of Advance Australia Fair to also recognise our First Nations people, and it's quite a beautiful piece of music, and I encourage everyone, if they haven't listened to it, to look it up on YouTube because it is magnificent. And then following Judith, there was a report in the ABC by Paul Donoghue on the 31st of July that talked about the life of Archie Roach. Archie was born Archibald William Roach, affectionately referred to as Archie or Uncle Archie. Guthrie and Barranjung elder, born in Marulapore, Victoria, and raised in Melbourne. Archie was awarded Queen's Birthday Honours in 2005, appointed as a member of the Order of Australia for his service in the performing arts, and campaigner for rights of First Nations people, renowned for his music as an accomplished singer, songwriter, and one of Australia's most notable ambassadors as a storyteller who lived, talked, sang about his life's experiences. He was also an educator of multiple generations. One of his most renowned songs, Let Love Rule, has the most point voice verse in it, and it talks about letting love rule, let us guide us through the night so that we may stay together to keep our spirits calm. Only truth will shine in the morning light because love is the only thing that will keep us safe from harm. He was very much a humanitarian and carer for peace. I'd also want to acknowledge Olivia Newton-John, who became Dame Olivia Newton-John, and the founding champion of the Olivia Newton-John Cancer Wellness and Research Centre at the Austin Hospital. And her legacy supported not only health and well-being, but the spirit as well. When diagnosed with breast cancer in 2009, she invested her life's journey to care for those that were enduring cancer and working very hard to raise money in the pursuit for research into the prevention and cancer or cure of cancer. Olivia Newton-John was born in England, but she was raised primarily in Australia. And as we know, singer, songwriter, actress, and she was officially appointed as Dame in 2020 at a New Year's Honour service by Queen Elizabeth. So 3 remarkable people who I believe it's important that we acknowledge their life and legacy, certainly in Victoria, in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Any other items of general business? Councillor Franco?
Thank you. I have a motion in relation to Wear It Purple Day that I've circulated to officers and to fellow councillors, and I wonder if that could be put up on the screen.
Thank you. We have it there. Can we just get all of it? Does it have 0.5? Won't work on mine.
I'd like.
Can I just check the number of points that are there with 5? Okay, now, Councillor Franco, I believe I can't allow that because of 0.5, because it's not minor or routine and it's not of a general nature that's been qualified by a report. And further, it's not actually a matter within the duties and powers of council, that it's not, doesn't relate to our community, it's broader than our community. So the advice is that that can't be allowed with 0.5 as a motion.
Well, if I amend 0.5 to say support the Victorian government's legislation regarding conversion therapy as outlined in the name of the Act, then it would be clear that it's not policy on the run and it's simply a simple factual statement in relation to existing state legislation which impacts on our local community.
Now, my understanding is that we are not in a position to make that ruling because we haven't had a report, and it would be inappropriate because it's not within our duties as a matter for council. So I can't allow it with 0.5.
And is there any modification of 0.5 that you would see? What about simply, if you don't want to refer to the legislation, Madam Mayor, that we simply support the Victorian government's ban on conversion therapy, and then we're not referring to the legislation if that's the key issue? I mean, I don't think it's a very complicated thing. We don't have a report before us that recommends condemning homophobia, for example, yet we're prepared to accept that. We don't have a report before us that, you know, that recommends for us to commend Wear It Purple Day, yet we're prepared to consider that. So are we prepared to consider
let me pause. I don't believe so, but let me pause. So the advice is that we have policies that relate to the first 4 points, but not that relates to 0.5, and that's a legislative responsibility of another level of government. So,
Okay.
you
Well,
know,
in light of that, I presume that that's something that could be considered separately under urgent business if that were relevant, and I could separate that off and then have that considered if it's not considered a minor matter, and we could separate that off, and I'm quite happy in general business then to seek to move the first 4 points.
okay, well, let's deal with the first 4 points. It will not probably be allowed as urgent business for the same reasons, but I guess we should deal with that when it comes to it. So are you happy to have a motion that has the first, or are you prepared to, happy is probably not the word, prepared to have a motion there that encompasses just the first 4 points?
I'm happy to move just the first. I'm willing to move the first 4 points. Yes, a motion that includes those first 4 points and ends with those 4 points.
Okay, so let's just see if we have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Bigot. Thank you. So is anyone opposed to that motion? Councillor Park, there's a couple of people who are opposed to the motion. Thank you.
Could I just raise a point of order?
Yes.
I'm struggling to understand the basis upon which this can be moved absent a notice of motion in terms of the governance rules.
Has been considered, and I understand that it possibly can. Can we just pause a moment?
Madam Chair, maybe I can assist. What the governance rules basically say for a general business item is that it needs to be minor and routine in nature. They're quite vague. So they are the 2 words that are used essentially, minor and routine in nature. And I think how Councillor Franco lands here is that the sentiments reflected in items 1 to 4 are consistent with programming and practice this council already undertakes. So in other words, we already support this community in the way in which those first 4 items contemplate a council might actually pass a motion. So that is why I think items 1 to 4 could be viewed as being routine and minor, and that's why Councillor Franco is putting it this way. Item 5 is more problematic in that regard, in the sense that, as expressed, it does effectively create a policy position on the run because council's not actually considered the concept of conversion therapy and his position on it to date. So that is a different kettle of fish in this particular case. I think that it would be difficult for item 5, I should say, as expressed, to qualify for acceptance as urgent business. There's nothing in the nature of item 5 which would satisfy the tests for an urgent business item, particularly that something has arisen since the last council meeting, which warrants dealing with prior to the next council meeting, as being one of those qualifications. So I think that there would be a struggle in having item 5 dealt with as urgent business. And what Councillor Franco would need to do to item 5 is essentially have it aligned very much with the other 4 items, that is, be minor and routine and reflect existing practice and programming undertaken by this council. So it neither adds anything nor takes away from anything council has already agreed to do.
Councillor Park.
Chair, I'd just like to address you briefly on my point of order, and I expect that you may well heed the advice of the CEO, but in my submission, this isn't minor or routine, and the very reason that the governance rules require a notice of motion and to be councillors to be given 48 hours notice for matters that aren't minor or routine, particularly absent a report, is that it allows councillors to actually do some research and form a view, albeit a preliminary view. And I'd be very surprised if the mover himself would label the substance of these motions as minor or routine. So in my submission, you, as Mayor, are in a position to make a ruling based on your view of whether this is minor or routine. So I'll leave it there. But I'll if the motion or anything like it is allowed, I'll certainly then speak against it.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Look, I am happy to leave it in because that's the advice that has been confirmed. I guess we can express our concern with the spirit of it in how we vote. Councillor Watson, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to echo my concerns, and they align with Councillor Park's. I don't think motions, I know you've had the advice that it's minor and routine, but this smacks to me of something that's not exactly minor or routine, and that it actually sits somewhere else. And as we've heard from Mr. Storer, we support our community in many ways, and this motion is entirely unnecessary. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Look, I will allow it, but I do think it's extraordinarily line ball. So we have a mover and a seconder, and we have people who are against the motion. So Councillor Franco, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to speak to the motion. Thank you. I'm wondering, before I speak to the motion, I mean, I've reworded item 5 while listening to this in a way that's not controversial and that doesn't require a policy stance, and which I think just signals, and I'm wondering if it's okay with the seconder. I'd like to just test this with you, Madam Mayor, and with the seconder, Councillor Biggar. Just to say, and I'll read out the words that I'm just playing with here, well, I've just worked up, that Council notes the recent legislative ban on conversion practices against LGBTIQ plus Victorians and commits to support LGBTIQ plus people across the city of Boroondara who are subject to such practices.
No.
You won't be willing to?
No.
Okay.
I'm reluctant to allow any of it, but we've agreed we will. But I think.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll speak to the other 4 points. I'd like to just start by noting and I'm going to quote a couple of points from Pride in Our Future, Victoria's LGBTIQ plus strategy, that 73% of LGBTIQ plus people have considered suicide, compared to 13% of the general Australian population. That 9.4% of LGBTIQ plus young Victorians have attempted suicide in the past 12 months. That 24% of LGBTIQ plus young people have experienced homelessness, and that 1 in 2 LGBTIQ plus adults have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, compared to with 1 in 4 in the general population. And this rate's even higher among LGBTIQ plus young people. Where at Purple Day is what's driven me to present this motion here today. And Where at Purple Day is a global movement founded in 2010 to raise awareness and show support for LGBTIQ plus young people in spite of the challenges they face. It's marked every year on the last Friday in August. This year, Wear It Purple Day falls on Friday, August 26th, and I've worn the most purple tie I got in solidarity. So many schools and community groups across Boroondara also hold events and fundraisers, and this includes a Wear It Purple Day trivia night at the Boroondara Youth Hub. So I understand. And Boroondara, our council, is already undertaking initiatives to support the LGBTIQ plus community, and I think my motion is completely consistent with our policies, with our current practices. We address inequities experienced by LGBTIQ plus people in the Boroondara Community Plan. We have the Skittles program run by the Boroondara Youth Services for young people aged 13 to 18. And I understand we actively participate in the Q East Alliance, a network for council youth workers to enhance our work in promoting the health of LGBTIQ plus young people. Finally, I appreciate that it's no longer part of the motion that I hope to bring forward, but in relation to the conversion practices, I mean, this is something that the AMA and the Australian Psychological Society and other health bodies around the world have spoken out against. And look, given that that's not there, I mean, I think it's such a significant issue and such a significant factor given the health concerns and the issues. I think it's worth addressing and raising, but look, I appreciate that's been removed from the motion. But look, I commend this motion to you, and I hope you'll support it and support this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Branco. Councillor Bigger, you were the seconder.
Happy to reserve my right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be very clear that I don't disagree with the intent or the principles behind this, but I really struggle. I can't support a motion calling for condemnation of anything without being informed as to what that involves and what the implications of it might be. I think it's very disappointing that the points suggest we might not be providing support and encouragement, which I think this is incorrect. And I think the mover has actually verbally acknowledged that we do provide in this community a lot of support. So I feel that there's a politically charged motivation possibly at play here. And to be quite honest, whichever way the motion falls, I sincerely hope that the outcome is not misconstrued in any way or used inappropriately to suggest that this council wants anything other than a safe, inclusive community for all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have a few hands up. Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavro and Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think that, I know you've taken advice and I respect your decision on this matter, but I don't think that this should have been allowed for debate. I know you said it was line ball, and I accept that. I think that this motion is very divisive. I think if it was a motion of substance, it would have been put up as a notice of motion where councillors had the opportunity to consider whatever they might like to consider. I don't like it because it implies that there's a deficit in what we're doing as a council, and we're doing a lot. So I fully support the work that we're doing to support our youth, LGBTI. I don't know if I got all the letters there, but I fully support all the work that we're doing to support all of our community, and that includes them. If this was a general motion to say, or a general comment to say, the officers and council is doing great work in this space, and we encourage the celebration of Wear It Purple Day, that's got a whole different flavour to what's going on here tonight. And for that reason, I'm just not going to participate in a vote because I think that it should have been put forward as a notice of motion, and this is like Councillor Gilly said, the outcome of this could be read all sorts of different ways. I think it's entirely inappropriate to have put it up in this fashion, and for that reason, I will absolutely be participating no further in what I see as a completely inappropriate use of council processes. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Stavrou.
And I must apologise tonight because technology has really, or Telstra's technology has really abandoned me. So I don't see anybody on the screen, just to give everybody context here. Nevertheless, we plod along. Look, I'm inclined to support it, but not certainly in the way and how Councillor Franco has put it. I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of the comments that Councillor Gillies and Councillor Watson have made. What really we should be looking, and the reason I'm inclined to support it is because I don't want it in any way to think for the LGBT community to think that we are not supportive of them. This council is extraordinarily supportive of the community, and we have done that through practical means. And if you go to our website, you will see a lot of the services that we provide out there, which effectively, to my mind, basically include 2, 3, 4. Everything that's in there is really pretty much what Boroondara is already doing. So I'm not sure what those clauses are supposed to be doing in being included. I'm not sure what they are saying that's new. And if it's not saying that's anything new, I don't understand the reasons why they would be put in there. The best way to go forward, I would imagine, is if we pretty much take out 2, 3, and 4 and have everybody to vote on 1, which is a very important thing. It's new. It's been raised in this meeting for us to be able to support the community in that particular way with a new initiative that was really brought in front of us. And I'll go back to the point of order too, because to my mind, the fact that this motion has been discussed so much and be tossed around so much, that fact alone does not make it to a non simple matter. That fact alone, Madam Mayor, makes it into a complex matter. If Councillor Franco, who is supposed to have thought about this motion before putting it to us, had to make so many revisions on the fly, had so many disallowances, and still a lot of us feel that the way that the remainder of what's put into us is not quite right. That alone shows that I don't think it's line ball. I think it's beside line ball. It's outside the court. But I will respect the decision. And as I said, I'm only inclined to support it because I don't want any other sentiment to be taken out, because I think supporting those that are affected is a lot more important than a motion that is not at all output if it's intending to support the community. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I take Councillor Franco's motion in good faith. In his comments, he mentions that this was only brought to him in recent time, and I'll admit I wasn't aware of the date of the 26th as being the Wear It Purple Day, so I thank Councillor Franco for bringing it to my attention. I appreciate in general business this could have been spoken to as a general comment and would have held the same level of weight, but the fact is that Councillor Franco has put forward a motion, it has been circulated and it has been accepted by governance and yourself as the chair. So I'm happy to support it. And I thank Councillor Franco for quoting stats that he did earlier. Clearly, through 2 to 3 years of COVID environment and isolation and challenging times for members of our community that are suffering adversity for whatever reasons, I think this is an area where we can say, you know, we are an inclusive community. I acknowledge that we as council already do that, and it's something that we have done, you know, for as long as I've been a councillor and beyond. But this is just reinforcing support for all members of our community. And I've looked on our social media. I cannot see any reference to recognition of We're at Purple Day. So whether or not we will be putting anything on Facebook or Twitter, yet to be seen. But again, I thank Councillor Franco for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Park and then Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Like Councillor Hollingsworth, I don't attribute improper motives to Councillor Franco, but I think this has been very, very poorly handled because the notice of motion provisions are there for a purpose, and that purpose really ought to be respected and observed. And, you know, quite frankly, We're at Purple Day has been observed late August for the last 10 years or more. So this isn't something that ought to have taken anyone by surprise. The difficulty that it presents for councillors when it's brought forward at very late notice is that effectively it has the tendency to wedge you into a position. And notwithstanding the difficulty in hearing Councillor Stavrou, what I could hear, I absolutely agree with. And in fact, I think the very important point that he made was that really the only paragraph of that motion that's easy to support is paragraph 1. And like Councillor Stavrou, I'm willing to support paragraph 1. I'm not willing to support on the fly the balance of the motion because I just think it's been brought in an absolutely inappropriate way. And I think councillors need to learn that there's a way in which business ought to be advanced before the council and their colleagues, and part of that is that we are given adequate notice. And so, unless something truly is urgent, this isn't put forward as an urgent motion, and it surely would fail that test. So I think the lesson ought to be learnt by all who would consider doing this in the future, that it's not appropriate, absent some very, very special circumstances, and councillors ought not to be forced into considering matters like this on the fly and not giving them the proper weight and consideration that they demand and deserve. And of course, the thing that's most egregious in all of this is that those who vote against the motion because there's elements that simply haven't had the opportunity to be properly considered and weighed up, they're made to look as if they're voting against things that they ordinarily would support in different circumstances, with the ability to actually have some discussions and take some advice and to form a proper view. And at 9:50 p.m. on a Monday night, through a fairly demanding agenda with a lot more to come, I just don't think it's fair and reasonable. So my position is that reluctantly I'll oppose the motion as it stands. I would support paragraph 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. I echo many of the comments that have already been said. We're at Purple Day was established, as I understand, in 2010. So for 12 years, we've known that it's in late August. And if Councillor Franco was a true ally of this community, then he would have done exactly as was suggested by Councillor Park and put this on the agenda through a notice of motion in advance of the meeting. Because what's resulted is a disservice to this community, a political debate which is absolutely unnecessary. And in my opinion, I accept your ruling on it, Chair. I believe that it should have been disallowed. Now, I'd like to put on record that I support our whole community, including, all of the various different parts of which it's made up, the whole community. And I think I'm forced to abstain from voting on this matter so as not to be written up in tomorrow's paper as opposing it. And that's a really unfortunate set of circumstances that we find ourselves in. I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. Now I'll just speak briefly, and and then I'll go to Councillor Biggar because I think you wanted to reserve your right. Likewise, I feel very uncomfortable about this, and I certainly can see why people think it shouldn't have been allowed at all. And it's a very hard one, I think. I do feel very uncomfortable about the process and the way we are put in this position where we perhaps don't support the process, but do support the sentiment potentially, but would seek officer advice, which we haven't had the privilege of being afforded. And that is very unfortunate because it seems very unreasonable that those who have reservations about the process possibly are going to be characterised as not supporting something that they clearly do support. So it's a very uncomfortable situation. I'll go to Councillor Biggar.
Thank you, Mayor. I do understand the last minute nature of this motion, that it has caused angst, clearly, and I want to acknowledge that it's not an ideal situation. It's not, I suppose, what any of us, and I'm sure including Councillor Franco, would have intended. Having said that, I do think it is fundamentally a positive motion with positive and important statements of support. I absolutely would agree with Councillor Stavrou's points on this, that and I would encourage other councillors to consider his take on it, which is that the process has been frustrating. It's not what was wanted, but ultimately a decision to support it because fundamentally what matters is our support on an issue that really is of great importance to this community. And I think, Wear It Purple Day is an important day on the calendar for the young LGBTIQ plus community. And I think what we're doing here is when people say, I don't like to support things that condemn things, but actually what we're doing is condemning behavior that we don't believe has any place in our community. We're saying that we already support this in what we do, and basically we're affirming that. And you might say, well, why is it even important for us to state this here? Why does it even matter? Certainly, as Councillor Franco mentioned, as mentioned in point 3 of the motion, young people in the LGBTQI plus community are at greater risk of worse mental health outcomes. They're including significantly increased rates of suicide and self-harm and higher rates of homelessness and other social disadvantage. That's not an opinion. That is fact. And in addition to this, why else is it important for us to state it here? Because this is a group that has given feedback to council and to me personally, saying that expressions of welcome and expressions of support, public expressions of welcome and support, are very important to them. That following years of discrimination and isolation, they ask for our public support. And I think that's what we're doing tonight. I would encourage my fellow councillors to put aside the awkwardness of the motion, acknowledge it wasn't perfect, but say at the end of the day, we're not setting a precedent that is going to cause us discomfort. What we're doing is we're throwing our support behind the young LGBTQI plus community. And I really would encourage you to do that and to support this motion. So thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll go back to Councillor Franco to close the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, there are a number of points I'd like to respond to. I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Bigger has spoken very eloquently, and I think more eloquently than I have. So a number of points have been made, and I'd just like to respond to them. Firstly,
can I just remind you we have 3 minutes for responding?
Okay. Firstly, it's false to suggest that I think Councillor Gillies made the point that I was suggesting that Burundara Council is not doing the right thing currently and that reads that way. Well, on the contrary, point 3 says continue to support. Continue to support means continue doing what we're doing, okay? The issue that we're condemning something is problematic. We're talking about condemning homophobia, condemning biphobia, transphobia, intersexism in all its forms. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's go to the point, the issue of the point of order. I raised and circulated notice of this motion to my colleagues and to management earlier this afternoon. Every one of you were aware. You had plenty of time. Yes, you could ask for more time. How much more time do you need? I mean, I think I put this up in general business because it's not controversial. The general business law rules are very clear. This is not controversial. It's not something extraordinary. We're talking about commending the upcoming Wear It Purple Day. Everyone says that's fine. But then there's this reference and discussion that the other 3 points in the motion, let alone the gay conversion therapy, are somehow controversial and that we need council officers' advice. We need council officers' advice to know whether we're prepared to condemn homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, intersexism. Really? Do you really need advice from council officers to know whether you're prepared to condemn homophobia? Do you really need council officers' advice to commend our current programs that we're providing and to suggest we should be continuing them? And do you really need advice from council officers and a lengthy report to know whether you're prepared to encourage LGBTIQ plus young people across our community to live the way they want to live without fear of discrimination? It's not complicated. This is not something you need a detailed report on. If you support this, I mean, I think a lot of excuses are being used here about points of order, about rules. There's nothing confusing. There's nothing controversial. You want more time. Well, fine. How much more time do you need to condemn homophobia? It's about leadership. It's not, if this council genuinely supports our LGBTIQ plus community, then let's have the elected council demonstrate that leadership and pass a resolution that demonstrates it clearly and unequivocally. This is nothing other than that, rather than say, oh, we as the elected council, we should just stay silent, and hopefully behind the scenes, council officers can continue to do the good work in secret, in quiet, without sort of ruffling any feathers. They can continue doing what they're doing. But as the leadership, let's step back and not pass a resolution. That's not acceptable. We're the leadership. We should step up. We should demonstrate that support, and council officers can continue the good work that they're doing. But let's be very clear, it sends a very clear signal. There's nothing controversial in this. In fact, I don't think we even need a report on gay conversion therapy either. I mean, that the impacts of that are quite well established. But look, and we haven't got that here today, but I just think we really need to be clear about the leadership and signal, and stepping aside, abstaining or voting against because of falsely presented discussions of points of order are not the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Those against?
I'll call a division.
Yep. And those abstaining? Thank you. So Councillor Franco, you wish to call a division?
Yes, thank you.
So those in favour of the motion? So that's Councillor Bigger, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Stavrou, and Councillor Franco. Those against? That's Councillor Park.
Madam Mayor, did you call Councillor Gold?
No, look, sorry, I can't see him down there. I'm so sorry. You've got a very wide screen behind you.
Can we do that vote again, please?
Yes, thank you. So those in favour? I can see your hand now, thank you. So we've got Councillor Biggar, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Gold, and Councillor Franco. And those against, Councillor Park, and those abstaining is Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Watson, Councillor Gillies, and Councillor Adders. Now, on my counting, 6 are in favour, so that motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So are there any other items of general business? Councillor Franco.
21. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make some observations regarding the 2021 census results regarding religious affiliation in Boroondara. The 2021 census results have been released and they show that Boroondara is among the least religious local government areas in Australia. Almost 75,000 residents in Boroondara, or 45% of our population, now identifies as having no religion. And if we include residents who identified as having If we include sorry, can you hear me? So I'm having.
We can.
And if we include residents who identified as having secular or other beliefs, such as atheism and agnosticism, then this covers 47.3% of our population. This is up from a total of 37% of the Boroondara population who identified as not religious at the 2016 census, and also equates to a growth of 37% in the number identifying as non-religious. 47.3% is significantly higher than the Victorian state average of 39%, and then the national average of 38% of residents who identified as having no religion. The figures for non-Christian religious faiths in Boroondara don't appear to be publicly available as yet. Otherwise, I've mentioned them here, but I think it's reasonable.
Give us too much of a lecture.
I'm about to conclude. I've only got a couple of sentences to go.
Thank you.
The figures for non-Christian religious faiths don't appear to be publicly available as yet. Otherwise, I'd mention them here, but I think it's reasonable to assume there's been some growth here in Boroondara, while at the same time a decline in Christianity. Yet, despite the demographic characteristics of our local community, we continue to begin each council meeting with a Christian prayer, despite the widespread objection to this practice from our community. Our governance rules try to make it part of the job of councillors to participate in an act of religious worship. And to me, it's effectively saying to our residents and councillors that we can only participate in the entirety of council meetings at the price of having to participate in somebody else's religious rituals. No one should have to pay such a humiliating price. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other items of general business? Thank you. So confidential business, are there any items of urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business? Thank you. Are there any items of confidential business? Thank you, councillors. So we have now come to the end of the council business for this evening. Sorry, I'm getting my pages confused here. So before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening and wish you and your family good health. And I now declare the council meeting closed. Thank you, everyone who was attending.